Part 1 of Who Burnt Columbia? This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Wales. Who Burnt Columbia? By Augustine T. Smith. Part 1. Depositions for Claimants. Who Burnt Columbia? Extracts from Depositions for Claimants. Extract from the case of J. Brown versus United States. Deposition of William D. Stanley. 8th. Were you in Columbia on the night of the burning? Answer, yes, sir. 9th. By what means was the city burned? Answer, by General Sherman's army of the United States troops. I saw a man with the uniform of a United States soldier on enter the store of Mr. Robert Bryce, on the block immediately opposite where Mr. Brown kept his store, and with a firebrand about 4 feet in length, wrapped on one end with canvas, put fire to the store of Mr. Bryce under the roof. All the buildings in that neighborhood were destroyed on both sides of the street. Previous to the general conflagration, I saw a number of soldiers pass me with tin cans and balls of cotton tied up with cord. In an hour or two the city was in flames. A United States soldier told me himself that he set fire to Colonel Clarkson's house. The United States soldiers were then all over the city. They appeared to have selected the northwest corner of every square on Main Street in the city, and fire broke out simultaneously from different portions of the city. The wind blew strong from the northwest at the time. Houses standing in detached grounds of from 3 to 40 acres were burned at the same time. There were no other soldiers in the city at the time except the United States soldiers under General Sherman. A United States officer, who was a perfect gentleman, who was sick in my store, told me that the city of Columbia would be burned that night, which was the night of the 17th of February, 1865, and also explained to me the signals which would be used. I then sent for the mayor of the city and informed him of the fact. While standing in front of my place of business, General Sherman, with a portion of his staff, was passing, and the mayor stopped them and told him that he had heard that the town would be burned that night. General Sherman replied, "Mr. Mayor, you can go home and make yourself perfectly easy. Your city and citizens are just as safe as if there was not a Federal soldier within 1,000 miles. They shall be protected if it takes an entire corps of my army. I will avail myself of some day, when the wind is not so high, to destroy the Confederate property." He then rode on. On that night, notwithstanding this assertion, I looked out for the signals of which I had been informed by the sick officer, and saw them. Immediately after the signals, the fire commenced at the northwest corner of every square on the main street. Before this, the cotton had been set on fire in the middle of the street, but put out by the fire department. About 3 o'clock on the morning of the 18th, General Sherman ordered his fire brigade to proceed to stop the fire and prevent its further extension. Very soon thereafter the fire stopped. W. B. Stanley. Sworn to and subscribed before me this the 7th day of February, 1872, Albert M. Boozer, U.S. Commissioner, Circuit and District Courts for District of South Carolina. Milo H. Berry, being duly sworn, deposed: I was in Columbia in February, 1865, when the city was burned. The first fire I saw, which was close to me, was set on fire by soldiers. I did not see the petitioner's store burned, but suppose it was burned in the general conflagration. The place I saw set on fire was set on fire by soldiers wearing the uniform of United States soldiers. This was on the 17th February, 1865. On the morning of the 17th of February, when the army of General Sherman entered, I came into the city, when I found that a committee of citizens had gone to surrender the city to General Sherman. This was about 8 a.m. Directly after, about 10 or 11 o'clock a.m., the army entered. After the army came in, about 12 o'clock, I came down street to the old market on the main street. There was cotton out in the street near the court house. The wind commenced blowing a lively breeze, and the cotton took fire. The soldiers ran for the fire engines, when I met one of the firemen and told him to open the engine house, and told him to run out the hose carriage, that they did not need an engine. The citizens and soldiers ran out the hose carriage and put the fire out. I did not see any more fire until about 9 or 10 o'clock that night, and this was the warehouse before mentioned. According to my best of belief, I presume there were 100 bales in the street. The cotton was strewn along the center of the main street for a considerable distance. The cotton was in bales. The wind kept freshening up all the afternoon. My observation in regard to cotton burning is that it burns like a live coal. It does not blaze when packed. The last time I saw the pile of cotton mentioned was about 12 p.m. of the 17th. I think there were other piles of cotton in the street, but I am not certain in regard thereto, nor can I tell whether or not other cotton was burned, except the first above mentioned. About 5 o'clock of the morning of the 18th, or before, a guard was sent to me. I had, however, procured a guard before. I cannot say whether or not General Sherman's army, or any portion thereof, acted as an organized body in an effort to subdue the flames. General Hampton's troops left in the morning previous to the burning. They left fully 4 hours before I saw the cotton burning as before stated. M. H. Berry. William Glaze, being duly sworn, deposed: I witnessed the burning of Columbia. I know that the city was destroyed by General Sherman's army, because they were in the city at the time, and I saw persons in the uniform of United States soldiers setting fire to the city in various places. I saw 2 such persons fire Mr. Phillips' auction warehouse. They opened the door and threw balls which they had set on fire into the building, and in less than 20 minutes the building was in flames. This building was diagonally across from the petitioner's store. It occurred about 7 o'clock p.m. All that part of the city caught directly after that, in about 1/2 of an hour. I saw several other houses fired, and among them my own building. I am speaking now of what I saw myself. I saw a building back of the old City Hotel fired by balls by persons wearing similar uniforms, whom I know to be United States soldiers, for they came into my own house. They burned my machine shop. There were about 100 soldiers there at the time. They broke up the machinery and then set fire thereto. Not, however, by balls, as aforesaid, but by the broken boxes, etc., and oil poured on. In the course of half an hour the conflagration became general. Most of the burning was done from that time until about 3 o'clock next morning. I was a member of the city council at the time, and went with the mayor to General Sherman, when General Sherman promised the mayor that there would be no burning that night. I saw no efforts on the part of the United States soldiers to subdue the fire, but on the other hand I saw them endeavoring to spread it, and heard some of them remark that it was not half enough. It was on my way home from our conference with General Sherman that I saw Mr. Phillips' warehouse fired. I saw a sky rocket sent up from the State House yard, where the headquarters of General Sherman were, which I took to be the signal for the burning of the city, for immediately thereafter the fire burst out all over the city. Soldiers had been stationed at different points in the meantime. William Glaze. Sworn to and subscribed before me this 18th day of March, A.D. 1872, Albert M. Boozer, U.S. Commissioner for District of South Carolina. John McKenzie, being duly sworn, deposed: I witnessed the burning of Columbia on the Main or Richardson Street. My own residence was burned. It must have been burned by bands of persons, and not by accident. I was a great part of the time about the fire on that night. Between 9 and 10 o'clock that night of the 17th February, I observed fires on the western side and eastern side of Richardson Street toward the State House. About that time I saw fires out of the city, apparently 3 or 4, or perhaps 6 or 8 miles distant and in the suburbs. Soon the fires became general. There were fires in the different parts of the city. We left the main street and went on the back street to Brennan and Castle's carriage factory, thinking we could there prevent the fire from proceeding on in the back of the city. But there I gave it up as the hands left. I saw soldiers during the time rushing about in and out of the stores. I noticed that after they came out several times, fires would soon break out from the stores entered, but I did not see any of them put fire to any building, nor did I see them carrying torches. They did not aid me at night in stopping the fire. I have been for many years president of a fire company. I have been connected with the fire department for 30 years. From my experience therein, I judge that the fire was the work of incendiaries and not of accident. I explain this in this way. The fires occurred in 20 or 30 different places at the same time, and so far from each other that they could not have been connected. United States troops told me in my store in the morning that I would see hell tonight, that they wouldn't leave one store upon another. The parties who made the remarks were United States troops and belonged to General Sherman's army. John McKenzie, sworn to, etc., etc. Extracted from depositions in the case of Wood and Hayworth versus the United States, Charleston office of U.S. Commissioner, April 17, 1872. Reply to interrogation. Alfred Huger, sworn. 84 years of age, resides in Charleston. I was postmaster in Charleston before the war, and I had held the office for 30 years. I was in Columbia in February, 1865. I was there when the Federal troops entered the town. I had conversations with several officers, and with one who was called Captain. I don't remember his name. I had a good deal of conversation with him, and a day or two after the fire this captain said in answer to my question as to who had fired Columbia, "We did it." His saying so only confirmed my own impression. If he had said anything else, it would not have shaken my belief and impression. And previously to the fire, the general impression in the town was that Columbia was to be burned. Nobody was surprised when the fire broke out, and in consequence of this general impression, I had taken what precautions I could to secure my family. I had conversation at several times with two private soldiers named Goodman and Elliott. They stated that the fire had been done by the army. Alfred Huger. Sworn to before me on this 17th of April, 1872, John F. Porteous, U.S. Commissioner. W. B. Williams, sworn. The officers of General Sherman's army told me that all cotton would be burned and all public buildings destroyed. This is all I know of General Sherman's ordering the cotton to be burned. The shed under which the cotton was stored was private property. General Sherman's army took possession of Columbia at about 11 o'clock a.m. At the time he came in, the city was under its civil officers and was surrendered to him by them. The Confederate forces had left the city that same morning and had held military possession until they left. My impression is that General Beauregard was in command. General Wade Hampton held a position as one of the commanding officers. There was a good deal of cotton piled in the streets of the city prior to its occupation by the Federal forces, with the intention that it should be burned, and an order was issued to that effect, but none was burned before the coming in of the Federal troops, and the order was not obeyed, and a portion of the cotton was not burned until the last day of the occupation by the Federal troops. A portion was piled in Main or Richardson Street, in the neighborhood of the old court house. At this place there was about 200 bales. The rest of the cotton was piled in different parts of the town, principally in and about the portion of town called Cotton Town. W. B. Williams, sworn to before me this 15th April, 1872. Jonathan F. Porteous, U.S. Commissioner. To Int. First, Orlando Z. Bates, aged 58 years, Columbia, South Carolina, merchant. To Int. Third, the city was in the possession of General Sherman's army after 10 or 11 a.m. on that day. General Sherman was in command of that army. I saw him on that day as he entered the city and passed along the main street at the head of the main body of the army. I was at that time one of the aldermen of the city of Columbia, and on the morning of the 17th February, A.D. 1865, was informed that the Board of Aldermen would meet at 6 o'clock a.m. Attended and was informed by the mayor of the city that the city was about to be evacuated by the Confederate troops, and that it would be surrendered to the army of General Sherman. In company with the mayor, Hon. T.J. Goodwin, and Aldermen McKenzie and Stork, I proceeded to the outskirts of the city and met the advance guard of the Federal army under command of Colonel Stone, to whom the mayor tendered the surrender of the city, informing Colonel Stone that there were no troops of the Confederate army in the city, and that the population was chiefly old men and women and children. Colonel Stone accepted the surrender, and deponent and the persons already named, accompanied by Colonel Stone, returned into the city about 12 or 1 o'clock, when I observed a number of scattered Federal soldiers already in the city. There was no alarm of fire and no burning of any description previous to the occupation already stated. The conflagration commenced after the entry of the United States forces. To Int. 4. A large portion of the city was destroyed by fire during the day and night of the 17th February, 1865, and on the following day. I was in the city and was at various points in that portion which was destroyed at the time of the burning, and saw the burning as it progressed. I saw the burning of several houses in the portion of the city lying between Main Street and the gas works at about twilight on the 17th. A little later, the store on Main Street, occupied by an aid association as a depot of supplies for Confederate hospitals near the corner of Plain Street, was set on fire. I was present with the fire company, aiding to extinguish it, and saw Federal soldiers sticking bayonets into the engine hose and cutting the same with hatchets and knives. The hose and carriage was finally demolished and the engine rendered unserviceable by the soldiers. These fires preceded the general conflagration. I will also state that a quantity of cotton had been brought out of the cellars of stores where it had been kept, on the east side of Main Street, between Washington and Main Streets, and piled in the middle of the street. As the troops passed it, I saw the cotton fired by them, striking matches and applying. The cotton thus fired was kept from spreading by Mr. McKenzie, the captain of the Independent Fire Company, having a hose attached to the hydrant at that point, and keeping a stream constantly playing upon it. This was during the afternoon of the 17th February. At about 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. on the 17th February, I saw several rockets ascend from some point near the State House. Shortly after this, my store, which was on Main Street, a few doors south of the market, was set on fire, and immediately after this I saw fires arising in various parts of the city, and in very short time nearly the whole of Richardson or Main Street was in flames. I saw several instances of Federal soldiers actually applying fire to buildings, and others carrying torches in various parts of the city for the same purpose. I conversed freely with the soldiers of General Sherman's army, both at the time of the burning and afterwards, and no one ever denied the act, but several expressed regret that the entire city was not destroyed. I saw numbers of them at the scenes of the burning, giving expressions and demonstrations of satisfaction by dancing and otherwise. To Int. 5. Every house from one square south of the State House to Upper Boundary Street, or Main Street, which includes all the business houses, were burnt up, excepting one small house in the extreme northern portion of Main Street. All the storehouses containing cotton were burned, and my observation was that every bale of cotton in Columbia at that time was burned. The large warehouses in the northern portion of Main Street, which were principally stored with cotton, were all burned. Cross-examined by James A. Dunbar, Esq., Counsel for the United States. I was an alderman of this city at the time of its surrender. Previous to the surrender the Confederate forces had occupied this city. They evacuated the city on the morning of the 17th February, A.D. 1865. I have no means of knowing who was in command of the Confederate forces in the city. Generals Beauregard, Joseph E. Johnston, and Wade Hampton, and General Law were here about that time. I saw them some days before the 17th, but not on that day. I saw infantry and cavalry of the Confederate forces leave the city on the morning of its occupation by the Federal forces. The cavalry, which was called Wheelers, left in the direction of Winnsboro at about 9 o'clock a.m., and the infantry at an earlier hour on the 17th. Prior to the leaving of the Confederate forces, cotton was piled up and stored on the back streets of Columbia. One lot was piled in Richardson Street, between Lady and Washington Streets, about 100 yards south of the courthouse. There were about 10 bales thus piled. This was the only cotton which I know to have been piled on Richardson Street. The bales were ragged and in bad order. This cotton was not fired or attempted to be fired, according to my knowledge, prior to the evacuation by the Confederate forces, and was not burning until after the troops of General Sherman took possession of the city on the afternoon of the 17th. I first saw it burning about 3 o'clock of that day. It was not entirely consumed at that time. It was extinguished first by the Independent Fire Engine Company, and then the hose was attached to the hydrant and ordered to be played on until the fire was entirely put out. No United States soldiers assisted in putting out this fire, as far as I know of. No cotton was piled on Richardson Street between Washington and Plain Streets, nor between Lady Street and the State House. These 10 bales, or about that number, was all the cotton which I saw piled on Richardson Street. At the time I returned into the city, after surrendering the city to Colonel Stone, there was a strong breeze blowing from a westerly direction. When the wind did not carry the fire, I saw the United States soldiers carry the fire by torches and apply it to the buildings which were not then burning. I am unable to state of my own knowledge who started the fire in the first instance. I do not know of my own knowledge that General Sherman or any subordinate officer issued an order or orders that the city should be burned. I never heard General Sherman say to Mayor Goodwin that private property should not be burned. On Sunday morning, the 19th of February, 1865, I knew the United States soldiers to assist in extinguishing the fire at the residence of Adam Edgar on Lady Street and in that neighborhood, and their efforts prevented the spread of the fire on that occasion. I do not know that Wood's division of Sherman's army were employed in the effort to extinguish the flames of the general conflagration on the morning of the 18th of February. At the time of which I have testified, I was not in the Confederate service. Cross-examined by William R. Bachman, Esq., counsel for plaintiffs. I do not know of any order being issued by General Sherman that any buildings in Columbia should not be burned, but I saw an order signed by a Colonel Williams or some officer posted in the building known as the Sword Factory on Washington Street to the effect that that building was not to be burned. I read the order myself. That building was not burned, but it was much damaged by the soldiers pulling off the weather boarding. On the 18th February, a little before sunset, I called to see the officer of the day at his headquarters on Plain Street, and in his absence was shown by the officer who represented him an order which forbade the firing of any house in the city, either by soldier or citizen, on the penalty of being shot. After this time the fire occurred at Adam Edgar's, as I have before stated, and at other places. These fires were extinguished by the aid of the United States soldiers. I do not know of any assistance rendered by the United States soldiers in suppressing the fire on the day and night of the 17th of February. Orlando Z. Bates. At about 11 or 12 o'clock that night, I saw a squad of United States soldiers enter my premises and apply fire to the outbuilding by means of some inflammable torches which they put to the buildings. I put out the fires so applied twice, and on the third time my residence and the neighboring dwellings were consumed. I saw the soldiers break in the door of the Washington Street Methodist Church, immediately opposite my own residence, and in a few moments after I saw the smoke and flames coming out of the doors and windows, and the church was soon consumed. I was in the company of 2 United States officers at the time of this occurrence, and they with me witnessed it. After leaving my own house at about 1 o'clock of that night, I saw a party of United States soldiers break into the residence of C. P. Pelham on the corner of Washington and Bull streets. I went to the door and saw these soldiers in the upper part of the building, and in a few minutes afterward I saw the flames break out of the upper part of the building, and it was soon burned down. I saw no other firing by soldiers during the night. Malcolm Shelton. Extracted from Depositions in the case of David Jacobs versus the United States. Testimony of J. G. Gibbs. The city was surrendered to General Sherman about 10 o'clock in the morning of Friday, the 17th February, by Dr. Thomas Jefferson Goodwin, the mayor, about 1 mile from the limits of the town. He rode out to meet the army coming in, and the forces entered the city and took possession just at 11 o'clock. I noticed the clock myself as the first van arrived. No resistance was offered to General Sherman or his army. Most of the Confederate troops left early on Friday morning. The rear guard, under General P. B. Young, of General Hampton's command, left just as the Federal troops were entering. No riots, fire, or pillage had yet occurred on the 17th day. The first fire commenced about 3 hours after the first entering. About 10 o'clock an alarm of fire arose, caused by the burning of some cotton in Richardson Street. It was set by the United States soldiers. My own impression is that the fire was accidentally caused by a cigar being thrown into the cotton. The alarm of fire was started, the fire engines immediately began to play on it, and subdued the flames. Just about the time that it was extinguished, the United States soldiers began to riddle and to cut up the hose with their bayonets. I was present immediately at the fire, which occurred just south of the market. There was no disorder, though the troops all seemed in a good humor, and were laughing and jeering at those who had extinguished the flames, but opposed no resistance except a few drunken men cut up the hose, but the fire had already been extinguished. Q. These drunken men were soldiers? A. Yes, sir, and there was some sacking, but was not general; that is, between this fire and night. I saw several instances myself. My store, amongst the rest, was broken open by the soldiers. No officer present. About 7 o'clock in the evening 3 or 4 rockets were thrown up in the extreme northwestern portion of the town. Immediately after that, fire was seen in 3 different points in the northwestern part of the city. The flames spread rapidly from each of those quarters. There was a strong wind blowing from the northwestern towards the southwestern direction, which caused the general conflagration. There is no doubt but that the city was burned by the wind spreading the flames, but whenever they came to a vacant lot and the flames would have stopped, they were started on this side by the soldiers, who had inflammable materials, turpentine and cotton. I saw various of the soldiers with bottles with some inflammable materials. I supposed it to be turpentine, with which they made fireballs, and started the fire in buildings in that way. My father's house was burned by them after having escaped the general conflagration. It was a fireproof building and had escaped the flames. I saw them fire the furniture in the house, turn over the piano, tables, chairs, and starting the fire from lace curtains, which they lit from the gas lights. There was a crowd present at my father's house who did his best to stop these proceedings, but was powerless. I did not see anything of the transportation of merchandise in vehicles or otherwise. No restraint was put by the officers, and no effort at all made until Saturday morning. No patrol or provost guard was to be seen suppressing the proceedings. The signals sent up were those already described, which were the signals for firing the town about 7 o'clock in the evening. Q. Whether immediately thereafter fires at various parts of the business portion of the city were about simultaneously started, and state such instances as you witnessed of the setting of such fires, how and where used and by whom done, whether any and what efforts were made by citizens to put out fires, whether on the 17th day an assistance was rendered them, and by any United States soldiers, whether the hose pipe was cut and any engine used in extinguishing the flames injured by the United States soldiers within your personal knowledge. Please state if you at any time knew or heard of any order by General Sherman or his subordinate on the 17th day of February forbidding the plunder and burning of private stores, buildings, and property, if such order was generally on said day known or promulgated, or if you heard of such an order issued after the conflagration had been subdued on the 18th of said February. A. Immediately after the rockets, the fire started at 3 different points in the northwest part of the city and extended very rapidly in a southeasterly direction. It was done by soldiers of General Sherman's army. Efforts were rapidly made by the citizens. The engines were not turned out that night because the hose had been cut when they were playing on the fire of the cotton at 1 o'clock in that day. Therefore the engines were of no service, but there were buckets of water, and the efforts were made to extinguish the flames by individuals until they were so interfered with by the soldiers that they found it useless and abandoned all efforts. Q. Were the engines injured? A. I think not, only the hose. Q. Did you hear of any order, etc.? A. I heard of no order. On the contrary, I have every reason to believe, from information derived from some of his own soldiers, that if the town was not actually destroyed by orders, the men fully understood that they would have license to do as they pleased. I can give my special reasons for saying that. For instance, a house belonging to me, occupied by Dr. Boozer, now physician of the penitentiary, was visited on Friday evening by United States soldiers, and in return for some kindness shown them by Mrs. Boozer, his wife, they kindly advised her to remove and conceal everything of value, that the town would be destroyed that night. She came to me and carried me to her house to see these men, who repeated in my presence these statements, but I could not believe it, and dissuaded her from any attempt to remove. I could not believe such a thing possible, but it turned out as they predicted. Q. When were you appointed mayor? A. The citizens had a meeting the morning after the fire, and sent for me in the State House yard, and begged me to take hold of the government of the city. J. G. Gibbs, sworn to, etc., etc. Extract from testimony of Joseph Sampson. The soldiers entered the town about 10 or 11 o'clock a.m., and they began to pillage about 2 p.m., and I saw colonels and captains with these soldiers while they were pillaging, and I saw no effort made by them to put a stop to these acts. I remained in Columbia until 1866, when I returned here to Charleston. No cross-examination. Signed, Joseph Sampson. Sworn to me before this 29th day of July, 1872. Seal, Jonathan F. Porteous, U.S. Commissioner. Extracts from depositions in Gravely vs. U.S. Deposition of John A. Civil. John A. Civil, a witness for the memorialist, being duly sworn, deposes and says: I was a resident of Columbia during the occupation of the city by the forces of General Sherman in February, 1865. I witnessed the conflagration of said city on the night of the 17th of February, 1865, and the days following. I saw United States soldiers, officers being present with them, put fire to houses during that period. I saw a United States officer and file of soldiers set fire to a storehouse containing cotton on the morning of the evacuation of the city by the United States troops. Cross-examined by Mr. Baskett. At the time I saw the United States soldiers setting fire to houses, the officers present were not assisting them in doing so. I saw one officer attempting to put the fire out. He was the only officer out of them all that I saw attempt to do anything to stop the fire. The officers, when applied to by the members of my family, said they could afford no relief. The first fires which I saw was about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening of the 17th of February. When the officers were applied to, as stated, several houses in my neighborhood were on fire. There was a little wind at the time, but a strong wind prevailed later in the night. John A. Civil. Deposition of Rowland Keenan. Rowland Keenan, a witness for the memorialists, being sworn, deposes and says, I am a resident of Columbia, and was present at the burning of Columbia on the 17th February, 1865. I saw during that burning soldiers in the uniform of the United States setting fire to buildings in Cottontown. At that time there were United States officers mingling in the crowd, and they made no effort to prevent the burning. I saw Federal soldiers set fire to the storehouse belonging to Mrs. Law at the corner of Upper and Richardson streets in the city of Columbia. The house was filled with cotton, and the buildings and cotton were completely destroyed by the fire. Cross-examined by Mr. Bauskett. I saw a company of 12 or 13 Federal soldiers with torches in their hands setting fire to several cotton houses in the upper part of Columbia, and there were 5 or 6 officers in that party. The streets were crowded with troops at that time. I did not see the officers actually assisting in the burning, nor did I see them make any efforts to prevent it or put it out. Cross, in reply by Mr. Walker. The soldiers spoken of as setting the fire must have done so under the observation of the officers present. By Mr. Bauskett. Could the officer have controlled the men on that occasion? The witness says, on the only occasion on which I saw them attempt it, they controlled them with ease. R. A. Kernan. Deposition of Ptolemy Chambers. Ptolemy Chambers, a witness, being duly sworn, deposes and says, I was a resident of Columbia on the 17th February, 1865. On that night I saw early in the evening Federal soldiers, commanded by an officer, setting fire to houses in the upper part of the city of Columbia. I lived in the immediate neighborhood, and saw the cotton house of Mrs. Law burning in the general conflagration on the night of the 17th February, 1865, and with its contents it was entirely destroyed. I know that it was filled with cotton belonging to Fisher and Agnew & Company. P. P. Chambers. Deposition of Charles F. Jackson. Charles F. Jackson, a witness, being duly sworn, deposes and says, I am a native of England. I was on Main street in the city of Columbia on the occasion of the entry of the main army of General Sherman on the 17th February, 1865. I witnessed the 17th Army Corps march through the main street, and was struck by the perfect order and equipment of the said corps. At the time the advanced corps were disbanded and breaking into and plundering the stores along their line of march, and though from the discipline of the said 17th Corps it would have been easy to have prevented this pillage, no attempt was made so to do. On the night following I witnessed United States soldiers with balls of combustible material, lighting them and flinging them about the streets and over and under the houses. Federal officers at the same time mingling in the crowd. The conflagration of Columbia, I believe, could have been prevented, judging from the perfect discipline of the United States Army when under orders, as I saw it on that day. Subsequent to the destruction of Columbia, I saw a United States officer, whose name I do not now remember, who stated to me that the burning of Columbia was premeditated, and he stated to me that he had seen the plan of march as mapped out, and that Columbia was marked for conflagration, and that it was a general understanding in the army that Columbia was to be burned. He further stated that any statement made by General Sherman to the contrary was a lie. The counsel for the United States objects to the admission of any statement made to witness. C. F. Jackson. End of Part 1. II of Who Burnt Columbia by Augustine T. Smith. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Part II. Deposition of General Oliver O. Howard. Part I. Deposition of O. O. Howard. The deposition of O. O. Howard, a witness produced, sworn, and examined on the part and behalf of the United States in the cause above entitled, now depending before the above-named commission, taken before me, a United States Commissioner in and for the District of Columbia at Washington, in said district, on the 10th day of December, 1872, pursuant to a notice to that effect duly given by the agent and counsel for the United States. Mr. A. S. Worthington appeared on behalf of the United States, Messrs. George R. Walker, Bartley, Denver, Mackay, and Wells on behalf of claimants. The said O. O. Howard, having been first by me duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, deposes and says: My name is O. O. Howard. My age is 42 years. My residence is District of Columbia. I am a native of Maine. My position is that of a general in the United States Army. Preliminary question propounded by the officer taking this deposition: Have you any interest, direct or indirect, in the claim which is the subject matter of the above entitled cause or of this examination? If so, state the nature and extent of such interest. Answer: I have no interest. Being examined by Mr. Worthington, of counsel for the United States, the witness further deposes and says: Question. State what your rank in the United States Army was in February, 1865. Answer. I was Major General of Volunteers at that time. I think I was not a Brigadier General in the regular Army until March following. Question. What was your command in February, 1865? Answer. I commanded the Army of the Tennessee, constituting the right wing of General Sherman's army. Question. Operating in the State of South Carolina? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Please state the principal points through which your command passed in the march from Savannah to Goldsboro. Answer. The principal portion of my command was transported to Beaufort, South Carolina, thence marched northward through Pocatello, Orangeburg, Columbia, Cheraw, Fayetteville. Subordinate columns swept into different towns. General Slocum had the left wing. He was at the north of me. Mine was the right line of march. Question. During the march, under what orders from General Sherman were you acting in respect to private property? Answer. They were to take such provisions as were necessary for the subsistence of the army, but generally to spare private property, with some few exceptions. Cotton was excepted. I was directly instructed again and again to destroy the cotton. Objected to by Mr. Walker, as the orders will show for themselves, they being the best testimony. Answer continued. I will put in evidence the orders I received from General Sherman, and the orders I issued on the subject, if it be desired. Question. On what day did you enter the town of Columbia yourself? Answer. The 17th of February, 1865. Question. Please state in your own way your recollection of the circumstances attending the occupation of that city and the destruction of a portion of it. Answer. On the 15th of February, in the vicinity of Columbia, opposite thereto, across the Congaree, we met with much resistance at Congaree Creek, and had to push our way very slowly, the enemy retiring before us. When we arrived opposite Columbia, we found the bridge across the Congaree destroyed by fire. We moved up to where the two rivers, the Saluda and the Broad, conjoined to form the Congaree. The bridge across the Saluda was destroyed by fire by the enemy. We bridged that and crossed our troops. The other bridge, when we reached the land intervening between the two rivers, was still standing, but as we attempted to cross it, it was set on fire by the enemy, and, having been covered with rosin, was in flames in a moment, so that even the Confederate cavalry rushed northward to save themselves, some of them without crossing. Our troops spent the whole night in getting across the Broad, which was a very difficult river. We ferried over a brigade at the beginning, by means of ropes and boats. That brigade was the brigade of Colonel Stone, and pushed its way up the hill slowly against the enemy, retiring. The enemy passed through Columbia, and the mayor came to the outside of the city and surrendered the city, I think between 10 and 11 o'clock, say 10 o'clock. In the meantime, a regular bridge was laid across the Broad River, and General Sherman and myself crossed over, riding side by side, before any other troops from this leading brigade had passed. It was about 10:30 that General Sherman and I rode over ahead of all the remaining portion of the troops that had not been ferried over, and rode directly on to the city, a distance of about 3 miles, entering it in what we called the main street. I believe the name as it appears on the map is Richardson Street. It was the one which led directly to the Capitol. At every corner of the street we met crowds of people, principally negroes. Not very far from the market house we met the mayor of the city, who had a short conversation with General Sherman. As my troops alone were to have charge of the city, I observed very carefully the disposition of the guards of the leading brigade, Colonel Stone's. Sentinels were located in front of the buildings of any considerable importance, and on the main street the principal portion of the brigade was in rest, waiting for orders. There was only that one brigade. We were ahead of all the rest. Near the brigade was an immense pile of cotton. Bales were broken open in the middle of the streets and were on fire. An engine was playing upon the fire, and soldiers and citizens were engaged apparently in extinguishing it. General Sherman was met with much enthusiasm by a company of soldiers. Observing them closely, I saw that some of them were under the influence of drink. Mr. Walker: Question. Were these United States soldiers? A. Yes, sir. There were apparently no others there. I ordered those that were drunk under guard immediately, and made every disposition necessary for the protection of property. We rode together past the market down to the railroad depot, called the Charleston depot, I think on the road going from Charleston to Columbia. That depot was smoldering, having been burned by the rebel troops on evacuating Columbia. Mr. Walker: Question. How do you know that? A. Only from the testimony of a great many who saw it. The statement of the witness as to the rebel soldiers having set the depot on fire was objected to by Mr. Walker on the ground that the witness does not know it of his own personal knowledge. A. continued. We rode to a foundry where guns had been cast, and observed that, and went afterwards through several streets together, when I separated from General Sherman, selected my headquarters, and gave the necessary orders for the thorough care of the troops and of the city for the night. General Sherman took his headquarters at the house of Blanton Duncan, and I mine at a house near the University, belonging to one of the professors. After this disposition I lay down to take a little rest, and was awaked first about dark by one of my aides, who said the city was on fire. I sent the aide, Captain Gilbreth, immediately to ascertain where the fire was, and to call upon General Charles R. Woods, the division commander, who had the immediate command of the city, to prevent the extension of the fire. I then at once dressed myself and went to the scene. There I met General John A. Logan, who was my next in rank, and who commanded the corps. We consulted together, and took every precautionary measure we could think of to prevent the extension of the flames, sometimes ordering the tearing down of sheds and small buildings, protecting the citizens, assisting them in the care of their property, and guarding it. Much of the property was thrown into the streets. Personally, I set a great many soldiers during the night to extinguishing the flames from the houses, and they went to the top of the houses where water was passed up to them. Nearly everything in my immediate vicinity was saved. A perfect gale from the northwest had commenced about the time we crossed the bridge, or before that, and continued all night, or until, I should say, between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. It seemed at first utterly useless to attempt to stop the flames. They were so hot that many of our own soldiers were burnt up that night. When the wind changed, however, it was easy to prevent any further extension of the fire. It was done. Some of our men behaved badly on account of being under the influence of drink, but they were replaced by fresh men as soon as their conduct came to the knowledge of the officer in charge. The 1st Brigade, Stone's, was relieved by another brigade of General Wood's division, and finally the entire division of General Hazen was brought into the city to assist. All the men who misbehaved that we could seize upon were kept under guard until the next day and punished. There were quite a number of our men who had been taken prisoners and were held by the Confederates. They appeared in the streets of Columbia soon after our arrival. I do not know myself where they were confined. The penitentiary was also opened and all its prisoners loosed. I found during the night a reckless mob very often, sometimes insulting ladies, and sometimes rushing into houses and pillaging. I did not see anybody setting fires. General Sherman himself stayed up with us for the most of the night. General Logan and General Woods were on the ground all the time until the fire abated, and I believe did everything they could to prevent it. General Sherman's order to me to destroy certain classes of property is a part of our record, and I remember the tenor of it. Objected to on the ground that the record testimony should be produced. Answer continued. I would like to make it a part of my testimony. Mr. Worthington: Q. State your recollection of it, General Howard. A. It was that certain buildings of a public nature should be destroyed, such as arsenals, armories, powder mills, depots, but that private property and asylums, so called, should be protected. I saw that the wind was so high that it would be impossible to destroy that class of buildings by fire on the evening of the 17th of February, and therefore refrained at that time from putting the order into practical execution. On the 18th and 19th, those buildings of that class that were left from the flames were destroyed. I have in my report an accurate list of them. The flames of this burning of the night of the 17th had destroyed a part of these other buildings included in the order. We destroyed also the railroad track. Though the order was to destroy cotton in South Carolina, yet no cotton remained that I know of after this fire to be destroyed. None was destroyed according to my recollection. Q. State what actual hostilities occurred near Columbia immediately before its occupation, if any. A. We had very heavy resistance on the other side in the vicinity of Congaree Creek, and all the way along. We had also very heavy resistance in crossing the Broad, the last river, the enemy's troops being posted in a very covered position. We hardly could reach them. They annoyed our troops and killed many. There we had our sleeping camp shelled during the preceding night, the night of the 15th, if I remember correctly, from the Columbia side, from a battery in the vicinity of Columbia. It excited the hostile feeling of the officers and soldiers very much indeed. They thought it was contrary to the rules of war. After we crossed the river there was scarcely any resistance. I think there was none in the immediate vicinity of Columbia after the mayor met us. Q. Do you know where these drunken soldiers obtained their liquor? A. I know they obtained it in Columbia. Mr. Walker: I would like the witness to state how he knew this, whether it is hearsay or what. The witness: It was not hearsay. I know the troops obtained it in Columbia. I know they had not any until they went into the city. I have testimony, for I investigated very thoroughly, that citizens carried pails of whiskey along the ranks, and that the men of the leading brigade of Colonel Stone drank with dippers out of the pails. Mr. Worthington: Q. You have said that you made every disposition for the security of the private property immediately after your entry into the city. I wish you would state more particularly what measures you took for the security of private property. A. The orders were general as to the manner of locating a brigade or a division in a city, and this brigade or division conformed to the general order. I saw them by my own observation taking up a central place for the main portion of the brigade and distributing different detachments to different parts of the city, locating sentinels very much as policemen are located in a city for its care. Then I gave verbal instructions to General Charles R. Woods, General Logan not happening to be near me. They should have been given to General Logan, but I gave them directly to General Woods, and he, doubtless, reported my orders to General Logan. He, at any rate, obeyed the order. Seeing some of these men in the 1st brigade under the influence of drink, my first order to him was to send in another brigade that had not had any drink, which he did. My next order went through General Logan to send a division into the city, which was General Hazen's division. General Logan himself took the immediate disposition of those 2 divisions. They were under his command and formed a part of it. He had 4 divisions, and these were 2 of them. The sentinels I tested myself as to the orders that had been given them, and those in front of houses told me that they had orders to watch against all fires or against any pillaging parties, and to see that no wrong should be done to private property where they were located. 1 or 2 executed the orders so thoroughly that after the fire had caught roost they hindered people from going in, but those sentinels were at once replaced, as it was the effect of the whiskey which did that. I took pains myself, as did my staff, to go about and to see, as far as possible, that everything was done rightly as ordered, for it was a fearful condition of things with such a fire and with so many women and children in the city. I would further say, to show our disposition towards the inhabitants, that though we were in war, we left 500 cattle for the people who had been burnt out and who were without food, and also provisions, and had them carted to the State House, and we also assisted the mayor in a method by which he could get provisions from those outside the city. Q. Were any applications made to you by the citizens before or during the fire for guards to protect their property? A. Constantly. Q. What was your reply to them? A. I always sent them. Where we had not soldiers immediately at hand, my aides themselves went. Lieutenant McQueen, one of my staff officers, stood sentinel the whole night and protected the property of the Rev. A. T. Porter of the Episcopal Church, and received his gratitude for it. Q. Do I understand you to say that no cotton was burned in Columbia by your order? A. None whatever. Q. If this fire had not occurred, what would you have done with the cotton in Columbia? Mr. Walker, I object to all answers to that question, and to all testimony elicited by it. A. I had no specific orders to burn the cotton in Columbia, and I should not have burned it without consulting with the General in Chief. If he had ordered it to be burned, I should have burned it, and if he had ordered it to be spared, I should have spared it. By Mr. Worthington: Q. Do you know anything about some rockets having been sent up in the vicinity of the State House on the night of the 17th of February? A. I do. Q. State what you know about that. A. The rockets were sent up by the Signal Corps. The left wing was quite a distance from us. General Blair's corps was located outside of the city, and one half of General Logan's, and it was customary for the signal officers attached to each division or corps to communicate with their neighbors as to where they were, or to give any events of the day. They did it in the daytime by flags, and at night by rockets, and this was done that night. The signals meant nothing else that I know of. Q. Do you know of any understanding before the occupation of Columbia, or after it was occupied, that it was to be destroyed? A. On the part of whom? Q. On the part of anybody. A. By the officers there was a distinct understanding that it should not be destroyed, and those were the orders; that is, the private property, asylums, &c. On the part of the men, I don't know anything about it. I have no knowledge whatever. They always had to obey orders. I think perhaps I had better finish with this on the part of those prisoners I have described, though it was only hearsay. Objected to. A. (Continued). I will say this: there may have been such a plot on the part of the prisoners. Supposition objected to. Mr. Worthington: Did you hear anything from the prisoners themselves, or any of them in that regard? A. I did. Q. State what it was. Objected to. A. A lieutenant of our army, who had escaped from the jail at Columbia, told me that when he mingled with the crowd he thought that mischief was to be done. He said, being demoralized, before he was restrained by any officer, he mingled in with those who were doing mischief, not specially the burning of Columbia, but doing mischief such as soldiers do when they sack a town. I inferred from what he told me that the prisoners had no good will towards Columbia. Objected to on the ground that the officer of the United States Army should be produced to testify for himself. Answer continued. I can ascertain his name. I know him, but his name has gone from my memory. My report, made at the time, was quite full, and I would rather have that as a part of the record than my simple statements from memory. Q. Have you that report here? A. I have a copy of it. Q. Your retained copy? A. My retained copy. Counsel for the United States offers to put in evidence General Howard's retained copy of his report to which he has just referred, to which counsel for the claimant objects and requests that a copy from the original on file at the War Department be obtained. Counsel for the United States therefore withdraws his offer. Q. Did you at that time keep a diary of these occurrences? A. I did. Q. Have you that with you? A. I have. Q. I will ask you to look at it and read therefrom your notes of February 17, 1865. Objected to on the ground that the official report is the best evidence that can be given by the witness of the occurrences in Columbia. A. These are my official field notes from which I made my report. Reading: Near Columbia, South Carolina, Friday, February 17, 1865. Early this morning skirmishing commenced on the banks of the Broad River, and a force thrown over in boats. The enemy was soon driven from the banks of the river, and a pontoon commenced. Artillery was used by us, and the skirmishing continued, our troops advancing up the hills on the east bank till about 10 a.m., when the Mayor of Columbia appeared to our skirmish line with a flag of truce, and formally surrendered the city. The pontoon was soon finished, and the troops commenced crossing. General Wood's division, which had effected the crossing, were encamped about town. The remainder of the 15th Corps was pushed out through the town and across the Charlotte Railroad, where they went into position facing northeasterly. The 17th Corps commenced crossing the Saluda early this forenoon, and followed the 15th Corps across the Broad. They are crossing the Broad to night, and are taking a position on the left of the 15th Corps. General G. A. Smith had early in the day secured some boats, and had thrown some men over the Congaree River. These had advanced into the city and planted their colors about the same time with the pickets of the 15th Corps. The streets of the city were filled with burning cotton, which the very high winds was blowing about. From this is supposed to have originated a fire which broke out in the evening, and which swept over about one half of the city. Another thing which may have started it, or which at least made it worse, was the fact that on the entry of our soldiers into the city, many of the citizens and negroes, in the hopes of conciliating our men, gave them a large amount of whiskey, which made the men totally unmanageable. The brigade which was guarding the town, Colonel Stone's, was immediately removed from the city, and another one took its place. No wagons except ammunition were brought over Broad River to night. The general commanding remains in the city to night. In this record, which must be more accurate than my memory, I notice it speaks of the removal of this brigade. I was thinking that it was not removed entirely when I gave my testimony. Mr. Walker: Q. Is that your handwriting? A. No, sir, it is not. I very seldom made my own record. I dictated it. That was at my dictation. Mr. Worthington: You may read also your entry of February 18, 1865. A. Reading: Columbia, South Carolina, Saturday, February 18, 1865. The wagon trains and everything belonging to the army moved into the city to day. The two corps were engaged in destroying the railroads and public buildings to day. The general has been engaged all day in trying to alleviate the sufferings of the citizens burned out, &c. Escaped soldiers and officers, prisoners of war, keep coming in having escaped from the enemy. That record of the 18th February was not at my dictation, it was by my adjutant. Q. But the one of the 17th, you say, was dictated by you, taken down by an amanuensis, I suppose? A. Yes, sir. Mr. Walker. Q. What date did this dictation take place? A. That record of the 17th was dictated on the morning of the 18th. The witness was now examined as to Cheraw and Camden. Mr. Worthington. Q. At any point in your march from Savannah to Goldsboro' did you order the destruction of any private property, cotton excepted? A. I do not remember any, certainly none that would not have been taken for public use. If we met with whiskey in quantity, whether it was public or private property, we destroyed it to prevent the demoralization of our troops, and if we came across a large pile of corn that could have been used for the troops or the animals, and could not carry it off, we destroyed it. In one case we ordered the destruction of a pile of corn, at some point, I think, between those two places, but I am not quite sure. I think I can state positively that there was nothing else, purely private, beside that, ordered to be destroyed. Q. Is there anything else in this connection which you would like to state? A. I would only say that the name of the officer whom I have heretofore mentioned as an escaped prisoner from Columbia is Captain E. M. Carpenter, 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry. Cross-examination by Mr. Walker. Q. Do I understand you to say you were second in command in the city of Columbia? A. I was second in command of all the troops, probably you would say principal in command in Columbia. Q. General Sherman was the commanding officer of the army, was he not? A. General Sherman was in command of all the troops in that vicinity, in all that region. Q. Who was his second? A. I was. Q. Did General Sherman give instruction or orders except through his second in command? A. He very often gave them. Q. Through others? A. To others, directly to the division commanders, and sometimes to company commanders. The witness here testified as to the burning of Orangeburg. Q. When you reached the Congaree River, I understand you met a resistance. How many miles up the river, then, did you move from your first position opposite Columbia before crossing? A. You misunderstood my testimony. It was Congaree Creek instead of Congaree River where the severe resistance was first met. But from the place opposite Columbia, where we halted, it was 3 miles to the factory where we crossed the Saluda. Congaree Creek, I think, is some 6 miles below that, making about 9 miles from where we first struck Congaree Creek to the factory. My memory is not very accurate about it. Q. You met this resistance, then, 6 miles below Columbia? A. The first resistance. Q. The first severe resistance? A. The first I speak of, at the crossing of Congaree Creek. Q. When you were directly opposite Columbia, did you meet with any resistance then? A. All the way up. Q. Did you meet with any hostility from the Columbia side? A. Yes, sir, very severe. That was the worst shelling I saw. Q. That was the night you were directly opposite Columbia? A. Yes, sir, asleep in camp. Q. Who was the general commanding the forces opposed to you? A. General Wade Hampton seemed to be in command. Q. He fought you all along the line of the Congaree River, as I understand you? A. General Butler was in immediate command of the troops that opposed us on that side of the river, but General Wade Hampton was on the other side of the river, on the Columbia side, and had command of all the troops. Q. Have you ever met General Wade Hampton since the war? A. Yes, sir. Q. Have you ever discussed with him the subject of the capture and destruction of Columbia? A. I had a conversation with him on that subject. Q. What was the date of that conversation? A. I don't remember. I paid several visits to Columbia while I was in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau, and in one of those visits I had a conversation with him. I do not remember and cannot recall it. Q. Was any one else present at the period of this conversation? A. Yes, sir. I think it was General R. K. Scott. Some one was there. Q. No one else? A. I do not remember. Q. Was there any one there to take down the conversation? A. Not that I know of. It was a mere informal conversation. There was nothing pending. We were merely talking as two officers do. Q. You were not aware that there was a newspaper reporter taking down the conversation at the time? A. No, sir, I was not. If I had, I would not have opened my mouth. Q. Do you know Mr. De Fontaine? A. No, sir, I never saw him to my knowledge. Q. Do you remember what you said in the course of that conversation? A. No, sir, I don't recall it, but I feel perfectly sure that I said about what I have said in my official report. We might have conversed about some details that are not in it. Q. Did you admit or state in the course of that conversation who destroyed Columbia on the night of the 17th of February, 1865? A. Yes, sir. I think I stated that the Confederate troops set it on fire. Q. That the Confederate troops set it on fire? A. Yes, sir, I think so. That was the matter of discussion between us. Q. You did not admit that it was the Federal troops, excited by drink, that did it? A. I may have said this, that doubtless men excited by drink set fires. Q. But not your men? A. I didn't say our men set them. Q. You did not state then, or at any other time, that it was your belief that the United States soldiers set fire to Columbia? You positively swear that? A. I do not wish to make a direct answer to that question because Q. I would like a direct answer, General. Mr. Worthington, let the witness finish his answer. The witness. I do not like to make a direct answer because I have often said that I thought some of this crowd of stragglers, in which were soldiers from different parts of the army that had come into the town and from the jails, as I have described, set fires. I have said that I believed they did that under the influence of drink, but not that they primarily set the city on fire. I have never said that, neither do I believe it. Q. About what hour of the night of the 17th of February was it that you arrived at the scene of the conflagration? A. Just after dark, when it was first reported to me. Q. Do you know of your own knowledge, not from hearsay, that there were any United States prisoners in the penitentiary at Columbia on the night of the 17th of February, or the day previous? A. I know of my own knowledge that Captain Carpenter was a prisoner, and that I put him on my staff in order to take care of him, and that he came with me all the way north. I do not know of my own personal knowledge of any other prisoner except by official reports. Q. Did these prisoners wear the United States uniform? A. Generally they had some of it left. The pants were almost always blue. Q. They were rarely fully equipped in uniform? A. No, very seldom. Q. Did you see the rockets fired previous to the conflagration, or at any time after that period? A. I did not see them. Q. Then you know nothing about them except from hearsay? A. I had a signal officer on my staff who was engaged in throwing them up, and so reported to me. That was the best evidence in the world to me. Q. The best evidence then would be the official reports? A. Yes, sir. Q. All of which are filed in the War Department? A. Yes, sir, or the testimony could be obtained of this officer, whose name I have. Mr. Worthington. Q. State his name. A. First Lieutenant J. P. Sampson, Signal Corps, United States Army. Mr. Walker. Q. Do you know of any barns, cotton gins, mills, machinery, or any property of that nature destroyed upon plantations on your line of march? A. I do know of it. Q. There was quite a large amount of it destroyed, was there not? A. Yes, sir, quite considerable. Q. Are you cognizant of the fact that large numbers of houses of private citizens were destroyed during that march? A. Yes, sir, there were, a very large number. Q. By troops of the United States? A. That I do not know, but I presume so. By soldiers. Q. You presume they were destroyed by the troops of the United States? A. Yes, sir. Q. Please state whether your experience was A. Let me modify my last answer. Sometimes they were not destroyed by our troops. Sometimes the Confederates destroyed them themselves prior to our coming. It was a curious thing that our troops and the Confederates were often destroying the same class of property. That was a curious fact that I remember distinctly, particularly in the case of that cotton you speak of. Q. Are you not aware that in parishes close to Pocotaligo there is scarce a dwelling house left from the ravages of the United States Army? A. Not altogether, no, sir, but from both armies I am perfectly aware of the desolation, and beheld it with my own eyes. Q. Do you not believe a large portion of this destruction of private property to have been by troops of the United States? A. No. I think the Confederates left us precious little. Q. Of residences, I mean? A. Well, residences. That one thing alone I could not say of my own knowledge. You know that generally when our troops destroyed private property they were not ordered to destroy it. Q. I ask you to state from your belief. A. If you wish me to state what I know with reference to the absolute destruction, I know that I saw it with my own eyes. I saw chimneys standing after the houses were burned. Q. I ask you to state from your belief. Do you or do you not believe that a large number of residences, gins, and other private property were destroyed on the line of march and by offshoots from the main army, columns, brigades, and companies? A. I believe there were, often by army followers and by army preceders. A set of scoundrels used to precede the army often and pretend to belong to it. I wish that fully stated, because I can give you one case where 3 men, nothing but common robbers, preceded the army, pretending to belong to Sherman's army, went into a house, piled up the furniture in the middle of the floor in the parlor, set it on fire, frightened the people, and made them give up their silver, gold, and everything they had. Those did not belong to the army. Then there were scoundrels who followed the army, who were very much of the same stamp. Q. But do you not believe that there were officers in company with the troops who destroyed such property? A. Oh, no. I never knew but one case of an officer. I found one officer once robbing a private house and stealing jewelry from a drawer. I had him instantly arrested, and would like to have had him hung. Q. Do you not know that much more property was destroyed in South Carolina on the line of march than was destroyed in Georgia? A. Yes, sir. Much more, and much more than in North Carolina. That was true. Q. Do you not know that there was a sort of vengeance animating the army? A. Yes, sir, I think there was. Q. Which was wreaked upon South Carolina? A. I have no doubt of it, not the least. Q. Do you not know that the officers were often in unison with the men? A. That I do not know. Q. What do you believe? A. I think not. Q. Not the superior officers. I do not mean them. A. I think even no subordinate officers, unless they had been prisoners. There were a great many who had been prisoners. There were a great many who had been prisoners in South Carolina, and they were particularly hard. I can give you one instance that occurred. A poor prisoner had been hunted by dogs, and his arms were considerably torn. His wounds had healed so that he went back to his duty, but whenever he saw a dog, no matter of what kind, he would kill him, shoot him down at once. There was a spirit of vengeance animating all those men. That I had evidence of continually. Here the witness testifies as to the arming of the colored troops. Q. Now, coming back to Columbia, the Saluda is the further river and the Broad the nearest? A. The Saluda is the one to the west, and the Broad the one to the east, the eastern branch. Q. After you crossed the Broad, did you meet with any resistance? A. Oh, yes, our troops did. Q. After getting the whole army across? A. Yes, a very severe resistance indeed, until they were dislodged. When they were dislodged, they retreated and ran straight through the city as fast as they could go, and the mayor came out and surrendered the city. See note at end of deposition with reference to this question and answer. Q. Was this resistance in the night or morning? A. It was all night and from daylight until about 9 o'clock, perhaps between 8 and 9. Q. Then fighting occurred from daylight until 9 o'clock? A. I couldn't say exactly the time. I should say between 8 and 9. Q. Daylight of the 17th, do you mean? A. Yes, sir, of the morning of the 17th. When they were dislodged from their position, they retired without any further fighting. Q. How far out from the city did the mayor go to meet you? A. He met me in the city. Q. How about the advance guard? A. He met Colonel Stone outside of the city, so Colonel Stone reported. Q. How far outside? A. I do not think he states in his official report. Q. Then you depend for that information upon Colonel Stone's official report? A. Yes, sir. Q. Do you know of any resistance whatsoever after the surrender of the city? A. Do you mean in the immediate vicinity of Columbia? Q. I do. A. None whatever. Q. Were you under any fear of an attack while you were in the city of Columbia? A. No, sir. We knew too well the location of the enemy's forces to be under any great apprehension. There was only cavalry in our immediate vicinity, and we were never very much afraid of them. Q. If, therefore, it should be decided, taking it for granted for argument's sake, that Columbia was destroyed by the United States troops, it was not a military necessity? A. I did not then, and do not now, regard it a military necessity to destroy Columbia, if you mean the entire city. There are always certain public buildings, such as powder houses, arsenals, places where Confederate money was made, public depots, and such things, that I would regard it as a necessity to destroy, but that did not involve the destruction of the city. Q. That might have been done so as to destroy the residences of the poor? A. Yes, sir, certainly. Q. Was it not understood by the officers in command, inferior to yourself, and by officers generally throughout the army, that cotton was to be destroyed when found? A. It was the order. Q. You required no specific order to destroy any individual lot of cotton? A. No, sir. Q. Any officer finding cotton was authorized by general orders to destroy it? A. I do not like to give a direct answer of yes to that question, because I do not remember the terms of the order; but I do remember the method of acting under the orders that General Sherman gave me. The orders, of course, will speak for themselves. He directed me to destroy the cotton in Georgia and South Carolina as a military necessity, as the Confederates depended more on it for their means of existence, subsisting their forces, and continuing the war, than upon anything else. I had that order, and gave that order to General Logan and to General Blair, but I do not think they extended that order to every subordinate officer to destroy anything at his discretion. I think the corps commanders kept the manner in which it was executed more under their direct supervision than to order every officer to destroy it at his will. With reference to public property, General Sherman told me what public property he wished me to destroy, and yet he gave me a specific order whenever we came to any place like Columbia, and that order is matter of record. Q. If any colonel under your command had reported to you that he had found cotton and had destroyed it, would you have reprimanded him? A. I most certainly should if I had restrained the execution of the order to the corps commanders. I should have first asked him if he had instructions to do it. If he said yes, of course I would have no reprimand for him. But, as I say, if he did it at his own option, when I had restrained the execution to the corps commanders, I certainly should. Q. You say if you had restrained its execution. You put a hypothetical case. I want the case as it was. A. I say it was a matter of record. I would rather see the order before speaking. I do remember the method in which it was executed, as I stated it to you a little while ago, but I don't recollect the wording of the order. Q. I want to know what your action was upon any report to you of the destruction of cotton. A. So far as my recollection goes, cotton was destroyed under the supervision of a staff officer of the corps commander, and when it was reported to me I had a careful record made of it, and have retained the exact amount that was destroyed by my command. Q. What commands the staff officers gave to their inferior officers you do not know. You do not know whether they retained this matter entirely under their own jurisdiction. A. The operation was this: if it required a company or a regiment to do it, the staff officer went with the command and saw the thing executed, and when it was done came back and reported to his corps commander, who made his daily report to me. I made a record of those reports, and here (referring to diary) is the result of the record: number of bales of cotton destroyed, 15,000. Cross-examination by Mr. Bartley, appearing for claimant Henry S. Jacobs, No. 163. Note: Judge Bartley did not appear until the direct examination of the witness had been concluded. Q. You have spoken of the hostile feeling which the army manifested towards South Carolina as a State. Was that manifested before you reached Columbia? Was that state of feeling known to exist? A. I noticed the first indication of it at Beaufort, South Carolina. Q. Was that before you reached Columbia? A. Yes, sir. We were first transported across from Savannah to Beaufort. That was the first place we reached. I noticed it at Beaufort. They were all Northern men at Beaufort, but our troops did not seem so to understand it. Q. With a hostile state of feeling running through the army with reference to South Carolina, was it not manifest that upon the army taking the capital of the State it would be burned? A. I do not think I noticed anything more there than all the way along. Q. From the state of feeling manifested, was it not reasonable to apprehend that that would be the result? A. Yes, sir, and therefore all the way along, and there also, unusual precautions were taken for the protection of private property. Q. Did not you yourself apprehend that on the taking of Columbia the burning of the city would be a probable result on the capture of it at that time? A. I did not, because I thought we had sufficient power over our forces to prevent anything of the kind, if anything of the kind was meditated, of which I had no evidence. Q. Which portion of the army first entered Columbia? A. General Stone's brigade of General Charles R. Wood's division of the 15th Corps. Q. At what time did General Logan's forces enter the city? A. These were Logan's forces of the 15th Corps. Q. They were under the command of General John A. Logan? A. Yes, sir. Q. Was not that portion of the army more reckless in the destruction of property than any other portion, if there was any difference? A. I think not. I do not know that one part of the army under General Sherman was more mischievous than another part during this march. That is my firm belief. Q. Was not General Logan's force distinguished somewhat for the destruction of property? A. Yes, sir. Part of the 15th Corps were rather remarkable prior to this campaign for the destruction of property. They had been under orders to do it more than other forces. Q. Was that the part of the army that entered Columbia first? A. Yes, sir. Q. Do you say this disposition to destroy property and the manifestation of hostile feeling fell under your observation at Beaufort? A. Yes, sir. Q. What precautions do you say were used on entering Columbia to prevent that destruction of property? A. The locating of a brigade as a police force, thoroughly posting it as you would post a police force in a city, and then the removal of the brigade as soon as something was discovered in the conduct of the men that led us to think some of them had been drinking to excess, and replacing them with another brigade, then the placing of the whole division in the city, and then the adding to that of another division of the troops, and taking prisoners all who did any mischief or who were perceived to do any mischief or wrong. This was an unusual precaution in this case, such as we had not early exercised in entering a village or city. We were unusually careful, I mean, in those precautions. There was a general order or rule by which we always posted a force. Q. Did that police force precede the force which first entered Columbia? A. Yes, sir. They took the whole brigade for a police force. Q. That was called the police force? A. It became a police force immediately upon entering the city under the command of officers. The orders with reference to the protection of the city, and as to what property was to be destroyed and what spared, were prepared by General Sherman and by myself very carefully before crossing that bridge. Q. You knew, did you not, that this brigade which first entered, which you called the police force, was governed by this hostile feeling towards South Carolina as much as any other portion of the army? A. I do not exactly see the bearing of that question. Q. I will repeat it. Were you not aware that this brigade which first entered, and which you call the police force, was governed by the same hostile feeling towards South Carolina that governed the army generally, that the police force themselves would be as apt to burn Columbia as any other portion of the army? A. We had no such forces. Our troops obeyed orders. They did not burn the cities they were told not to burn, and they were not told to burn any cities or anything else. Q. The burning, then, and the destruction of the city was by order? A. There was not any such order. Q. Well, Columbia was burned. A. Not by order. Columbia was burned, but not by any order of General Sherman's or any of his officers at all that I know of. Q. You have just said that no city was burned except by order. A. If you will allow me to correct myself in regard to the word except, I would like it. I mean to say simply this, that our troops were under good discipline, and when they were sent to execute an order, they executed the order. If they were sent to protect property, they protected property. That was the general rule. Whatever feeling any individuals might have, still they obeyed orders. They received and executed these orders. That was the general rule, and they did it well. Q. Do you intend to be understood that as the army passed through South Carolina, no property was destroyed excepting by orders of superior officers? A. No, sir, I never said that. I said the very opposite. Part 2. Who Burnt Columbia by Augustine T. Smith. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Part 3. Deposition of General Oliver O. Howard. Part 2. Q. You said the army was under good discipline? A. Yes, sir. Q. And that no property was destroyed except by order. Explain that, if you please. A. I did not say that at all. If I did, I wish to correct it. I did not say that no property was destroyed except by order, for a great deal of property was destroyed without orders, all the way along by people who preceded the army and by people who followed the army. Q. Was that before you reached Columbia? A. All the way along, all the way through South Carolina, before we reached Columbia and after we reached Columbia. Q. Wantonly and unnecessarily destroyed? A. Often wantonly. I regard all that irregular work as wanton destruction of property myself. Q. With that general and ungovernable hostile feeling, was it not reasonable to apprehend that the capture of Columbia would result in its destruction? A. It may have been, but I did not so apprehend it, and had sufficient faith in our discipline and in the control of the officers over the men to think that Columbia would not be destroyed. To show that I did not apprehend it, I lay down in the city and went to sleep in a place where I would have been burned up. Q. Did the entire army go into Columbia? A. No, sir. Q. What portion of it did? A. General Logan's entire corps, I think, passed through the city, but only 2 divisions out of the 4 of which it was composed were on duty in the city. Stragglers from different parts of the army, as I ascertained by prisoners that I took, were in the city. Q. Could you give us the probable number of the force, or some idea of the force which entered Columbia? A. I think the leading brigade had about 2,000 men. General Wood's division had about 6,000 men. General Hazen's division about the same. Q. About 14,000? A. About 12,000 men. General Wood's division included the leading brigade. Q. Was that the whole extent of the force that went into Columbia? A. All that remained in the city. The other marched through and went to its camp. Q. Did the entire army march through? A. No, sir. Q. What portion of the army passed through? A. One half of my command. My command was 33,000 strong. There was a little over one half. I should say about 20,000 men marched through Columbia. Q. Is that besides the 12,000 that remained there? A. Oh, no. There were 4 divisions of General Logan's corps, 2 of which were used in the city, and 2 were not. Q. How long did the 20,000 men stay in passing through? Did they stop at all in the city, or did they pass right along? A. They did not stop at all, or leave the ranks at all, excepting those that we brought in for guards. Q. How long did the 12,000 men remain in Columbia? A. The first brigade was relieved and removed from the city before dark, I think, if I remember rightly, and it was replaced by another brigade about as strong as that. Then the remaining portion of General Wood's division, and used until in the night, perhaps at 10 or 11 o'clock. General Hazen's division was ordered into the city to assist in the protection of the city, the property, and the people, in the midst of the fire when it was severe, and to prevent the extension of the fire. Then all those troops remained there until the next day. Q. How soon after the entry of that 12,000 in the city did the burning of the city commence? A. It commenced before we arrived there. 2 depots were burnt before we got there, and was smoldering when we arrived at the city, and the cotton was on fire in the streets. That was when General Sherman and I arrived. Q. That is, the cotton was burning? A. Yes, sir, in the streets, and the 2 depots were previously burned and were smoldering. Q. What was the state of the weather, and how was the road? A. It was blowing a fearful gale. By Mr. Walker. Q. That was in the night? A. All day of the 17th, and all night until 3 o'clock, when the wind changed. By Mr. Bartley. Q. Was there a heavy wind in the morning when you entered? A. Yes, sir, it was blowing very hard. It was difficult for us to ride with comfort. Q. You spoke of the railroad depots as being where the cotton was burned? A. No, sir, the depots themselves were burned. One of them was the Charleston Railroad depot. Q. Was that depot in possession of the Federal army? A. No, it was burned by the Confederates, without any doubt whatever. Of course I didn't see it, but I know it from the official testimony. The Charleston depot was right upon the street which is the prolongation of the Congaree bridge. The name of the street I do not remember, but if I recollect rightly, the depot was on the right-hand side as you go up from the bridge. By Mr. Walker. Q. On the extreme outskirts of the city? A. Yes, sir, about halfway up the hill, not on the extreme outskirts, but not far from the southwestern border. Q. In what direction was the wind blowing? A. From the northwest. Q. This was in the southwestern portion of the city? A. Yes, sir, the other depot is in the northwestern part. Q. Now let us get back to the Congaree River again. When you crossed that river your forces were met by the Mayor of Columbia. He surrendered the city, as I understand you? A. Yes, sir. Q. Do you know what the terms of capitulation were? A. I do not. Q. Do you know whether protection was promised to life and private property? A. I know it was by General Sherman when he had an interview with him. That is my personal knowledge, but what passed between him and Colonel Stone I do not know. Q. You do not know by official report? A. No. Q. Do you not know that the property of foreign subjects was promised protection? A. I really think not, because none appeared. I did not see one. There was not one that I knew of who appealed to me as a foreign subject, but if he had I would have looked into it and protected his property if I could. Q. At what time did the main army enter Columbia? A. I should judge about 10:30 in the morning. Q. The main army, I mean, not the advance. A. I know. I should judge about 10:30 in the morning. Q. What time did the advance get in? A. It was in the neighborhood of 10 o'clock. It was before 10. There was a little detachment which crossed the river in boats and got over there, arriving simultaneously. The exact time I do not know, but the time we arrived, I should judge, was between 10:30 and 11 by my records. Q. The main army between 10:30 and 11 ? A. Yes, sir. Q. And went on in advance of General Sherman ? A. No, sir; they followed close behind all the way. Q. Now, Von Moltke has said that the Americans were an armed mob. A. He denies it, I believe; he says he never said it. Q. I wish your opinion on that subject at the time of the entry of that army into Columbia. A. I will give you my opinion by telling you that from the time I took command of the Army of the Tennessee at Atlanta, and until we arrived at Washington City, no division was ever 10 minutes behind time from the commencement of the execution of an order, and I never commanded an armed force in a better state of discipline. Q. Do you not believe that the army entering Columbia was in as perfect a state of discipline as an army well could be? A. As well as an army similarly situated could well be. I say similarly situated because we were in the heart of an enemy's country, and subsisting on an enemy's country. To accomplish this is the hardest problem a general ever has to solve. Q. They obeyed commands readily? A. Readily. Q. Were under thorough discipline, in fact? I am very particular on this point. A. Under very good discipline, indeed. If it was to march north, north we marched. If we wanted to attack the enemy, we attacked them, and if we did not, we did not. Q. One of the witnesses in the case of Cowan Gravely versus the United States uses these words in his deposition filed in this case on page 15 of the printed testimony, I witnessed the 17th Army Corps march through the main street and was struck by the perfect order and equipment of the said corps. A. He must have meant the 15th Corps that marched through the main street, I think. Q. It does not matter about that. I do not care to be particular on that subject. He goes on to say that from the discipline of this corps it would have been easy to have prevented any pillage at that time if it was so desired. Is that a fact? A. I think it is not a fact, nor a fair inference from the discipline of the command. Q. What I mean to say is, had you witnessed it, in marching through the main street, could you not have put a stop to any pillaging going on right in front of your eyes? A. Yes, sir, certainly. Q. You had troops enough under your command? A. Certainly. I saw the pillaging the night I was there, and put a stop to it instantly. Q. Now I wish you to state to me on your oath, when the main army marched down Main Street, did you not find that the advanced guard were disbanded? A. No, they were not. Q. The guard that had preceded you, I mean? A. They were not. Q. Did you see at no time during the day disbanded soldiers of your army breaking into the stores? A. No, sir. Q. Publicly breaking into stores in the face of staff officers? A. I did not. Q. You know nothing of the pillage of Main Street during the hours of daylight by your army? A. No, sir. Q. You don't know of any store on Main Street that was broken into? A. I saw nothing of the kind, and nothing of the kind was reported to us at all. Q. This is the first you ever heard of the pillaging of stores on Main Street by daylight? A. Yes, sir, the first I have heard of it. Q. I do not ask you of your own knowledge, but is this the first you have heard of the manner in which stores were broken into and publicly robbed by your troops? Or, if you object to the word robbed, say goods taken therefrom. A. I saw some parties during the night with my own eyes. Q. I mean during the hours of daylight. A. This is the first I ever heard of it. I did not know any such thing took place at all. Q. If any of the officers of the United States Army had witnessed such pillaging, was it not their duty to have prevented it? A. Of course, at once. Q. Was it not in their power to have prevented it? A. Well, here was a little break in that power, in this case, owing to this unusual thing in giving whiskey to the men. Q. I am speaking of the hours of daylight. A. I say in the hours of daylight. If it had not been for that, such a thing would have been impossible. Q. Taking it for granted now that the officers marching through the streets with the main army during the hours of daylight, seeing the soldiers of your army disbanded and pillaging stores and shops on each side of their line of march, had they not it in their power to have detached a force sufficient to have stopped such pillaging along the line? A. Any officer of sufficient rank could have done it, but that does not mean that a lieutenant might step out of one company and take possession of another company. Q. Any colonel of a regiment could have done it? A. Yes, sir. The whole demoralization of that first brigade was caused by the whiskey, and the brigade was replaced by another as soon as the facts were discovered. Q. Was there not plenty of whiskey in the stores of Columbia and in the shops of that city? A. There was. Q. If your men had broken into these stores, is it not more than probable that they helped themselves? A. It was more than probable. Q. Are you prepared to state that neither officers under your command, nor other generals or officers under their command, acquiesced in the destruction of Columbia by United States troops? A. With the exception of this officer whose name I gave you this morning, I do not know of one officer who acquiesced in its destruction. Q. But you are not prepared to say that they did not? A. No. You know there were 5,000 of them there. Q. Did the citizens meet you with hostility? A. No, not me. Q. I mean the troops, not you individually. A. I could not say. Q. Yet they gave them pails full of whiskey. A. That was done kindly. I think it was done with a view of conciliating the troops. So I understood at the time, and I put it down so in the report. Q. Taking it for granted that it was the desire of General Sherman or of his superiors in command to destroy Columbia or have it destroyed, or to allow it to be accidentally destroyed, would it not have been easy for him to have had it done without giving any direct order? A. Yes. Q. I mean if there were such a desire on the part of General Sherman or his superiors? A. We were so disconnected with everybody that there could not be any connection with his superiors about it, and they didn't know we were going to Columbia. Q. I differ with you on that point, and therefore I put a hypothetical case. Suppose even you yourself desired to destroy Columbia or any other city, what corps of the army would you have been likely to have employed for that work? A. I want to say to you that an answer to that question would be rather invidious. Q. It is a question of the utmost importance to me. A. There is a great deal of feeling between corps, and for me to select a corps would be something I should not like to do. Q. I insist upon a reply. A. From my knowledge of the army, I should answer you that a portion of the left wing of the then 20th Corps, that had once been under my command as the 11th Army Corps, would have made the most complete destruction of a city of any in the whole army. I am sorry to answer the question, but you ask it so pertinaciously that I give you that as my opinion. Blenker's old division used to annihilate property more rapidly than any other I ever saw. Q. Would not the 15th Army Corps have done the work as well? A. The 15th Corps did pretty well in the destruction of property, but I really do not think that they equaled the other. Q. Had they not a reputation for doing their work of this character well? A. They did work of every kind well. Q. I allude particularly to their leaving their mark through the portions of country along which they passed by the devastation of property. Had they not a reputation for that? A. Yes, they had. They were taken on several expeditions where the sole object was to cripple the enemy by the destruction of property, and I do not think there was any corps which had a reputation that exceeded theirs in the destruction of property. They gave a sort of double twist to all the railroad iron they destroyed, twisted it around the trees, and then twisted it around itself again. Q. They were pretty clever fellows, were they not, in their business? A. They did it pretty well and pretty thoroughly. Q. Did you ever have any idea of going to Charleston on this march? A. No, sir. Q. Didn't you think there was some chance of your being able to throw one of the Army Corps into Charleston? A. None. I knew the plan of the campaign was not to go to Charleston at all. but the enemy thought we were going there. We went right up the right bank of the Saltkahatchee. I was second in command, and if General Sherman had been killed, I should have executed his general plan. I had no idea of going to Charleston at all. Charleston fell of itself. Q. Did you ever hear anything of sowing Charleston with salt? A. No. Q. Was there not a general impression throughout the North that if Charleston was captured they would sow it with salt? A. I do not know that. I think there was a kindly feeling towards Charleston, inspired by General Sheridan himself, who had lived there quite a time. Q. You think General Sherman had no such idea, at any rate? A. No, he had no idea of destroying Charleston in any way. Q. You do not think he would have thrown the 15th Corps into Charleston? A. He could have done it, of course. He could have thrown in any detachment whether he pleased, but we didn't wish to do that. Q. You do not know that he had that idea at one time? A. Oh, I think he had not, or he would have told me. We conversed fully with reference to it. He may have had it in his mind at some time, but I did not know it. Q. You say that the police force you stationed in Columbia were the 15th Corps? A. Yes, sir. Q. You spoke of summoning a relief. Please explain. Was this relief summoned prior to your reaching the ground at the time of the conflagration, or subsequent thereto? A. Immediately on my going into the city. As soon as I observed these men under the influence of drink. That was the first relief, but the second was in the night. Q. The second was in the night? A. Yes, sir. Q. What corps did these reliefs belong to? A. The 15th Corps. Q. All of them? A. All of them. The other corps was not there. Q. Do you not know that the pile of cotton you speak of as having been on fire upon your entry into the city was extinguished? A. They were endeavoring to extinguish it as we passed along, but I do not know that it was extinguished. Q. Was it not under control? A. Yes, sir, I thought so at the time, though the wind was blowing very furiously, and little bits were all over the trees, houses, and everywhere. When I first heard of the fire in the evening, I presumed, of course, that it came from that burning cotton. My presumption was at once that it extended from that. Q. That is not your idea now, though? A. Yes, it is. Q. You believe that the conflagration in Columbia arose from the cotton that was burning? A. Certainly. Q. And nothing else? A. Well, primarily, I think it did from that. Of course, the depots were burned prior to our entering the city, as I have said before several times, and there were undoubtedly fires set during the night by somebody. I say there were fires set during the night from my knowledge of directions. That is an inference from my common sense rather than what I observed. Q. What portion of the city was the cotton in? A. In what we call Main Street or Richardson Street, not very far from the market. Referring to map, between Laurel and the State House. Q. That would be to the southwest of the city, would it not, or due west? A. No, you come in from the north and extend right down the river, and when you are about halfway to the State House, you find this cotton lying along the street. The witness was here shown the map appended to the claimant's proof in the case of Wood and Hayworth against the United States, No. 103. It was not far from the market house, pointing to a place on Richardson Street, between Laurel and the Capitol. Q. How large was this pile of cotton? A. I couldn't tell you. It seemed to be strewn about. Q. About 20 bales? A. Yes, sir, perhaps more. Q. And it was burning at 10 o'clock in the morning? A. Yes, when we entered. Q. And was most of it burned? A. No, sir. Q. A large portion of it? A. It seemed to be on fire all along. It was not in bales, it was broken open. It seemed to be a kind of a common pile which was smoldering. They were playing on it with an engine when we came in. Q. And the fire at night did not break out until after dark? A. After dark was the first fire that I heard of any building on fire, but it was very soon after dark, just about dusk. Q. You stated that some of your soldiers were burned? A. Yes, sir. Q. Arising from their drunkenness? A. I so judged. It might not have been from that. The fire spread very rapidly. Q. You stated that the penitentiary was full. A. No, I did not state that it was full. I said broken open. Q. You spoke of reckless mobs. A. I did. Q. Which came from the penitentiary? A. Some of them. Q. Do you know of your own knowledge of any one having been in that penitentiary besides one individual? A. No, sir, not of my own knowledge. By Mr. Wells, appearing for Claimants cases numbers 371, 458, and 459. Q. You say you knew of your own knowledge that Captain Carpenter was in prison. Now you know not from your own knowledge, but from his report. A. Yes, I did not see him there. Q. You only know of his being in prison from his having reported to you. A. He reported to me as a prisoner from that place. That is all the knowledge I have. By Mr. Walker. Q. You burned the public property in Columbia on the 18th or 19th of February, did you not? A. Yes, sir. Q. Do I understand you to say that subsequent to the night of the 17th, you know that no cotton was destroyed? A. No, sir. I say I do not know of any that was destroyed subsequent to that in Columbia. Q. But you are not prepared to say that there was none destroyed by order? A. No, sir, I am not prepared to say that there was not cotton destroyed. I can give you just what property was destroyed by my order. The witness here testifies as to Camden and Cheraw. Q. Was there any cotton left in North Carolina unburned in the line of march of the army? A. Not to my knowledge. I did not intend to leave any. Q. Did not all the officers and soldiers of the army act upon the knowledge of that general order to destroy it all? A. No, sir, not the soldiers, and I think not the subordinate officers. General Logan would be better able to say than myself how he executed the order, but my impression is, as I have already stated on cross-examination, that it was generally done under the direct supervision of a staff officer detailed for that purpose. Q. And the destruction of cotton belonging to private parties in South Carolina was regarded as a military necessity to cripple the Confederates? A. Yes, sir. A very large proportion of the cotton was in private hands. Q. Would not the destruction of the railroad and depot have effectually prevented the making of cotton valuable to any person? Objected to as calling for an opinion. A. No, it would not have been effectual, because we got into the habit of repairing railroads so rapidly that they were soon replaced. Mr. Walker. Q. After the 15th Corps had twisted railroad bars, could they be used again generally in a hurry? A. Not often. That was not the way they did it. They would tear up some side road that they did not consider of any particular importance, and make their main stems. Our troops used to build very rapidly. Indeed, we had to. The enemy destroyed as rapidly as we. Q. Had they so many lines through the South that they could tear up side roads? A. Oh, yes, it was often done. Q. Through South Carolina on the line of your march? A. No, sir, they did not repair our damage for a long time. That was the end off. Q. Don't you know from the number of railroad lines in South Carolina that they could not after you had done with them? A. I think it would have been very difficult for them to have done it, but they might have repaired the main stem, that is, they could have got railroad iron enough to have done that. I mean for the main line of transportation through the country, one line across the State. Witness testifies here as to individual lots of cotton. By Mr. Mackey, appearing for Claimants in case number 228. Q. Do you know of any officer being under the influence of liquor on the night of the 17th of February? A. Yes, sir, I saw one in the night. I did not know his name. Q. What rank was he? A. He was a lieutenant. Q. Did you see any during the day? A. No, sir, I never saw but this one under the influence of drink, and he was a lieutenant. Q. Did you hear of any? A. Yes, sir. Q. Did you hear of any being so? A. No, I only heard of one. Q. Besides the one that you saw? A. Yes, sir. By Mr. Wells. Q. You say it was a matter of military necessity to destroy this cotton. Will you state distinctly how this was a matter of military necessity, and why it was? I am referring, of course, to both private and public cotton. A. One view was that the enemy depended upon the cotton more than upon any other product to raise means both to carry on the war and to prolong it, and therefore joined in the opinion that the destruction of the cotton would be the quickest way to bring the war to a conclusion, to save the effusion of blood. On that ground and no other, I put it. Q. Were not the ports blockaded so that this cotton could not be shipped abroad at the time that this expedition was undertaken? A. That I do not know. Even if they were, still the fact of its existence was a fact of wealth among the people upon which the government could eventually depend, particularly where they could take everything they had for taxes, so that the very fact of the existence of the cotton was something on which to build, and when it was destroyed, it took away that foundation. Q. Still, if there was no exchangeable value arising from this cotton by shipping abroad, could the Confederate government reasonably be supposed to obtain any resources from it, and was the United States government and its army justified in destroying private property upon such a basis? Objected to by the counsel for the United States as calling for a matter of opinion, and asking the witness to decide a question which it is for the commission to decide. Mr. Wells: The witness said it was a military necessity, and I ask wherein and on what basis? A. My answer to it would be this, that as long as the Confederate bonds had any value in a foreign market, that value must of course be based on some credit, the belief in the holding of some property. The reality we could not destroy, but the cotton, which was so valuable particularly at that time, was a matter of credit. The very existence of it was a matter of credit. People around knew they would get it eventually if it was not destroyed. My only argument ever in favor of saving it towards the close of the war in my own mind, and that I offered at times, was that now we were able to protect it, and therefore it would increase the products of our own country. But prior to that, I believed it would be a good thing to destroy it for the sake of bringing the war to a speedy conclusion. Then again, there was another way in which we regarded this matter of a military necessity, that nothing would impress the inhabitants so much as to destroy that which they regarded as of more importance to them than anything else, and upon which they then relied almost altogether for their income, the cotton gins and everything connected with it. Q. Were not the United States forces now able to prevent, by the process which they had taken in cutting up the railway, this cotton from getting out into the market, and keeping it sealed up where it was? A. That would be a matter really contingent at that time while the Confederate armies were in the field. The moment Generals Lee, Johnston, Hardee, and Smith had surrendered, then, of course, we could prevent anything of that kind, but prior to that surrender, of course, it hung upon the result of engagements that had not yet taken place. I might also add General Hood to the list. As yet, we did not know that any engagement had taken place between General Thomas and General Hood. Q. You have, I believe, stated in your examination that the general plan of your expedition was the destruction of all public buildings and all cotton along the whole line of march. A. More than that, railroads also. Q. And you also, as I understand, have testified and do testify that such general orders were given to the corps commanders and handed down by them to inferior officers, and that they had acted from the time you landed at Beaufort upon that principle. A. No, sir, I did not state that in that way. Q. Well, how far will you state that to be the fact? A. I will state that general orders existed for the destruction of the cotton, but I am not willing to state that the orders were handed down to the subordinates, for my impression is that the orders were executed by the staff officers of the general commanding in the army, the generals commanding the wings, and the generals commanding the corps, supervising the operation and reporting regularly when it was done. Q. Would it not have been, as a matter of practical result, naturally the effect that the cotton would have been destroyed in the principal towns which you reached in your march, unless some specific order had been issued under these general orders restraining the destruction? A. Certainly; we took great pains to see it done. It being the order, you know it was not worth while to shirk it. It was the general order to do it, and when I had an order to do anything anybody knew always that it would be pretty thoroughly done. Q. Was there any specific orders issued restraining the destruction of public property, railways, and cotton in Columbia? A. No; there was an order to do it, distinct and clear, given me before we crossed the river. Q. A specific order to destroy? A. Yes, sir, but to spare private property. That was on the order itself. You named public property altogether, and of a public nature. Q. No, I did not mean that alone, but I mean cotton, both public and private. A. I will say certainly that there were no specific orders to destroy the cotton in the city. I had command of the city entirely. I should not have proceeded to have destroyed the cotton in the city without consulting with the General in Chief, who did not embrace it in his order to me. The reason was because there was a great deal of it in the city, and I did not know at that time how much longer he would continue his work of the destruction of the cotton. It was a question that we conversed about very often, General Logan, General Blair, and myself, how much longer it would be best for our government to continue the destruction of the cotton, and then again I would not have done it, because it would have endangered the burning of the city to have burnt cotton when the wind was blowing. I did not even undertake to destroy the buildings on account of it that night. I did not put the order in execution at all. Q. Then, if you had, some time at least previous to the destruction of Columbia, grave doubts as to the military necessity of destroying this cotton you have described? A. (Interrupting) No, I had no doubts at all with regard to it, none whatever; but I was looking for a time when the necessity would cease. I began myself to feel very confident that we would thoroughly conquer in a very short time, and I wished, of course, the moment I safely could, to see the destruction of all property cease. It is a great curse to a nation to destroy its property, as a general rule; but a military necessity presses you, and under that you destroy it. I have no pleasure in the destruction of property of any kind. Q. Would not the soldiers naturally at Columbia, no specific order having been issued restraining the destruction of private property, have engaged in it, whether in liquor or not? A. No, they would not. They did not at Cheraw, and they did not at Fayetteville. By Mr. Walker: Q. Do I understand you to say that your soldiers would not and did not burn cotton in Columbia? A. Mr. Wells said, naturally, he wanted to know if they would not naturally have destroyed it, and I said, no. Q. I will put it in the form of a question, as a fact, did they not? At the request of counsel, the question at the top of the page was here read for the information of the witness. A. I thought you said cotton. Q. I mean private property generally. Of course, cotton, unless stored in some Confederate warehouses, is private cotton, I understand. A. When you speak of a body of troops, you know what they are made of generally. The great proportion of the men are honestly trying to do their duty, and in the ranks do not do a thing without orders. They do not go out and misbehave. But there are some men who are irregular, and who commit mischief and do wrong. At Cheraw I have an example in my mind with respect to private property. A man had a watch taken from his neck. He was frightened very much about it. In the presence of his wife and daughter, he told me he felt very badly about losing it, and wanted to know if I let my soldiers take a watch off a man's person. I said no. Well, he said, they did it. I asked him to describe the man to me. His daughter did describe him. I found him out, had his head shaved, and had him drummed out of the service. That shows what I did with a man who performed such an act, and our discipline was of that kind. But I know there were a great many men who would steal and rob and do all sorts of mischief. By Mr. Walker: Q. General, as a matter of fact, did not the United States Army, or a part of it, under the command of officers, set fire to cotton when they were in the city of Columbia? A. I do not know of any instance in which they did it. Q. Can you say they did not? A. No, I never can say that. It is impossible to say they did not. I have on my record a literal list of what was destroyed by my orders, and cotton is not embraced in it. The witness here testifies as to individual lots of cotton. Redirect examination by Mr. Worthington. Q. I wish to ask you a question that I dislike to propound, but some insinuations which seem to be contained in questions which have been asked you in cross-examination require it. How happened it that the 15th Corps and not the 17th Corps first entered the city of Columbia? Was it by your order or by the order of General Sherman? And was there any design in putting the 15th Corps first, and if so, what was it? A. No, sir, it was simply that the 15th Corps occupied the right in our operations, and the 17th the left. They would naturally have the lead in going into Columbia. Q. Was it by your order or General Sherman's order that that corps happened to have the leading position? A. Mine. There was no selection and no election. It occupied the right in all these operations, and came first to the bridges. The left had its operations a little further to the left, and followed it naturally. By Mr. Wells. Q. You had simply to post them into positions, I suppose, and they kept that position, and you would not naturally shift them from one position to another? A. I would. Sometimes I changed purposely to have the 17th Corps in advance, particularly if the 15th Corps had been some time in advance when we were along the same line. Generally they moved in parallel lines. I moved in 3 columns habitually, and sometimes 4. By Mr. Worthington. Q. Had the soldiers of the 15th and 17th Corps at any time previous, while under your command, occupied cities in South Carolina and Georgia? A. They occupied Beaufort, and they occupied Orangeburg previous to Columbia. They were not very large cities. They were towns. Q. Had you any reason to fear, prior to the hour you were aroused on the evening of the 17th of February, and informed that Columbia was on fire, the destruction of the city or any part of it? A. I had sufficient reason to fear that injury might be done to the city by irresponsible men connected with the army, or not connected with the army, to take all the necessary precautions, which I did. Unusual precautions, I may say, for a commander of an army to take. Generally speaking, I would have sent to General Woods to take charge of this city, and would have left him to do it himself, without any positive specific instructions. I did not do it in this case. I have intimated that some of our soldiers felt specifically aggrieved at South Carolina. They seemed to regard South Carolina as in a measure the cause of the war, and of their sufferings, and for that reason I took unusual precautions, and I wished to protect private property. I often guarded private property, and sent guards many miles to do it, guarding against stragglers and irresponsible parties. My opinion with reference to the burning of Columbia is a different thing. Your question is, had I any reason to apprehend it, and I am only showing what reasons we had to apprehend danger. Q. Did you or not suppose the city was safe when you retired for the evening? A. I did, and went to sleep there. Q. You have spoken of the excellent discipline of your soldiers. Did that ordinarily continue after they had been furnished with liquor and made drunk? Was it so easy for you to control them then? A. It was not. The number that was under the influence of drink was comparatively small, and they were brought under guard in a very short time. By Mr. Walker. Q. Were not most of the places through which you passed on your route to Columbia through South Carolina destroyed by someone, you do not say who? A. No, not so. Midway, when I left it, was in good condition. Mr. Sims' property was left in good condition. I sent through General Blair and protected his library by a sentinel. Q. But don't you know a great many that were destroyed? A. I went over the country afterwards, and it was pretty completely cleared out. I saw the chimneys and scarcely anything left in a great portion of the country, passing through there. I went down through it, and that was what I observed. The witness testifies here as to Orangeburg and Blackville. O. O. Howard. Note. Upon reading over by General Howard of this deposition, he states, referring to cross question number 77, that he understood the question to refer to the leading brigade and not to the whole army. Also, referring to cross interrogatory number 239, he states that he understood the question to refer to South Carolina and not to North Carolina. I, James O. Clephane, United States Commissioner for the District of Columbia, do hereby certify that at the request of counsel for the United States, I caused the above mentioned O. O. Howard, deponent in the foregoing deposition, to come before me at the time and place in the caption mentioned, that said deponent was by me sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, that said deposition was reduced to writing by me, and was carefully read to or by deponent before being signed by him, and deponent then and there in my presence subscribed the same, and I further certify that I have no interest, direct or indirect, in the claim to which the above deposition relates, and am not the agent or attorney of any person having any interest therein. Witness my hand at the city of Washington, D.C., this 10th day of December, 1872, James O. Clephane. Adjourned till Wednesday, December 11th, 1872, at the same hour and place. James O. Clephane, United States Commissioner. End of Part 3. Of Who Burnt Columbia by Augustine T. Smith. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Part 4. Deposition of General William Tecumseh Sherman. Part 1. Adjourned till Wednesday, December the 11th, 1872, at the same hour and place. James O. Clephane, United States Commissioner. Washington, December 11th, 1872. Commission met pursuant to adjournment. Present, counsel on either side. The examination of witnesses was proceeded with as follows. Deposition of William T. Sherman. The deposition of William T. Sherman, a witness, produced, sworn, and examined on the part and behalf of the United States in the cause above entitled, now depending before the above-named commission, taken before me, James O. Clephane, United States Commissioner for the District of Columbia, at the city of Washington, D.C., on the 11th day of December, 1872, pursuant to a notice to that effect duly given by the agent and counsel of the United States. Mr. A. S. Worthington appeared on behalf of the United States. Messrs. George R. Walker, N. Dana Wells, and Edward Janine appeared on behalf of the claimants. The said William T. Sherman, having been first by me duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, deposes and says: My name is William T. Sherman. My age is 52 years. My residence is Washington, D.C. I am a native of Ohio. My position is that of General of the United States Army. Preliminary questions propounded by the officer taking this deposition. Have you any interest, direct or indirect, in the claim which is the subject matter of the above entitled cause or of this examination? If so, state the nature and extent of such interest. Answer: I have none. Being examined by A. S. Worthington, of counsel for the United States, the witness further deposes and says: While on my march through the South in 1864-65, I was a Major General in the regular Army. I am now General of the Army of the United States. The witness here testifies to occurrences in Georgia. Q. Please refer to any orders that were issued while you were in Savannah relating to private property and to the maintenance of good order. A. I find here, referring to a printed volume in his hand, one order dated 24th of December, 1864, referring to rules which were to govern the officers in regard to public and private property in the city of Savannah. It is number 141, Special Field Order, and dated December 24th, 1864. Continuation as to orders and incidents in Georgia. Q. During the march of your army from Savannah to Goldsboro, North Carolina, what orders were in force concerning the preservation or destruction of property? Please refer to the orders by number and date. A. Glancing at the printed volume before referred to, the same troops which had crossed from Atlanta to Savannah continued their march from the direction of Savannah northward, passing through the State of South Carolina in its whole length, and were covered by the same orders and the same rules of discipline which had prevailed previously. Objected to by Messrs. Walker and Wells on the ground that they knew nothing whatever regarding the orders referred to, that they had neither seen the originals nor certified copies, and had no knowledge they were official, that while such orders may have been issued, contrary orders may have been issued the next day. Witness. All these orders have been printed and published over and over again. Mr. Walker. No official copies have ever been furnished us. Witness. They are all filed, and the War Department will furnish you with official copies whenever you ask for them. Mr. Walker. It is not for us to ask for them, but for the United States to furnish them. Q. Please state whether in your march through South Carolina you at any time authorized the destruction of private property. A. I did. Corps commanders were at all times authorized to destroy private property where it fulfilled any military uses, and to the commanders of all detachments. Mr. Walker. I must ask this question before you go on, General. I notice you have in your hand a printed volume, and that you are apparently reading from the same. I desire to know what it is you are reading from. I think I have a right to know that. Mr. Worthington stated that he proposed to examine the witness in his own way, and if there was any objection it could be made regularly and entered upon the record. Mr. Walker. Then we object to General Sherman, in his examination in this case, reading from a volume of which we know nothing, it never having been presented to us for our inspection. Witness. The volume I have in my hand is my own memoranda, bearing my own signature, and what I state from it I desire to have regarded as testimony given in the case. Mr. Walker. I must then inquire, General, whether that memoranda of which you speak is in your handwriting. Witness. It is not, but it was printed under my supervision in the War Department, and every word of it was carefully examined before it went to the press, and has been since. Mr. Walker. We object to it as not being in the handwriting of the witness, and we not knowing that the copy produced here is an official copy, and even if we were satisfied on that point, we would further object to it on the ground that the original, if in existence, is the best evidence and should be produced. Examination resumed. Question. I will now repeat the question I asked you, and that is, whether at any time in your march through South Carolina you authorized the destruction of private property, and if so, in what instances and for what purposes? A. I required the destruction of all railways, depots, foundries, and arsenals. I generally, in person, saw that they were so destroyed. I never gave an order for the destruction of a private dwelling, more especially if it were occupied by a family. Q. Did you authorize the destruction of cotton generally? A. I authorized the destruction of cotton wherever encountered, regarding it as one of the principal resources of the enemy in carrying on the war. It was a saleable article, easily converted into money, which was notoriously used for purchase of arms in Europe. It was made the basis of one of the principal loans of the Southern Confederation. Mr. Walker objects to this testimony as being matter of argument. Q. During your march through South Carolina, how did your different corps communicate with each other at night? A. By signals and by couriers sent from one to the other, generally by signals of rockets. Q. About what time in the evening was it customary to send up these rockets? A. As soon as the night was far enough advanced for rockets to be seen in the dark. Q. By Mr. Walker. When necessary? A. Always, every night, to indicate the position of heads of columns. Q. Do you know whether or not rockets were sent up on the evening you arrived at Columbia for that purpose? A. I did not see them, but I presume the order was obeyed, and from the head of every other column, some of which were 12 miles from there. Q. You have heretofore been examined generally with reference to the burning of Columbia, in the case of James J. Brown, No. 37. Do you reaffirm what was stated in that deposition? Mr. Walker objected on the ground that no notice had been given them, that the testimony in that case was to be used in the cases in which himself and Mr. Wells appeared, and that they had had no opportunity of examining the testimony with a view to cross-examination. A. I testified in some case when in Egypt. I think it was in the month of February or March. I have not seen a record of that testimony since I gave it, but I take it for granted that what I swore to then was true. My memory of these events is very clear, and yet I always prefer to refer to dates and facts which are of record and in my possession. Objected to by Mr. Walker and Mr. Wells, on the ground that they were entirely ignorant of what the witness swore to on the occasion mentioned, nor was it stated by the witness. Q. State whether you authorized the destruction of any private property at Columbia, except such property as you have enumerated in your answer to the previous interrogatory. A. None whatever. On the contrary, I forbade the destruction of private property, libraries, colleges, and dwellings. Q. Please state where you were when the fire broke out. A. The fire was burning a day and a half or 2 days before we got into Columbia, but was local, confined to the big bridge across the river, the depot, known as the Charleston depot, close by the bridge, and the railroad depot on the opposite side of the town, known as the Charlotte depot, and cotton piled up along the various streets, and which was burning at least 12 hours before any soldier belonging to my army had gotten within the limits of the city of Columbia. On the night of our arrival, after we had been in quiet possession of the city for about 12 hours, a fire originated near the old market house. It must have been after dark, for I saw the light shining on the walls of the room in which I was, and sent one of my aides-de-camp down about a mile to see what was the matter, and he came back and told me that the drug store diagonally opposite the old market house was burning, that the wind was very strong and the fire was spreading. I inquired if he had seen the commanding officer of the brigade, which constituted the provost guard, and if he was doing his best to prevent an extension of the flames, and he told me that he had seen General Charles R. Woods himself on the ground, and that the troops were doing seemingly all they could to check or limit the flames to that one block. That must have been about 7:30 o'clock in the evening. We had entered the town about 11 o'clock that morning. The fire continued to increase, and a second time I sent one of my aides down, becoming uneasy about it, and he returned, saying that the fire appeared to be beyond all control, and he had seen General Logan and General Howard there, whose troops occupied the city. Howard being in chief command, Logan in command of the 15th Corps, and Charles R. Woods in command of the troops immediately quartered in the city. The fire continued to rage until after midnight, when I went down myself to walk around the burning district. I saw the flames carried sometimes 2 blocks by the force of the wind, and the fire spreading in every direction and from natural causes. I assisted Mr. Simmons, who had married a Miss Ragg, of my acquaintance, to move his family and effects from the house threatened up to my own, which was the house of Blanton Duncan, then contractor for the manufactures of Confederate money. That family was removed, but the house, fortunately, did not burn. I was myself out until 4 o'clock in the morning, and I believe those troops worked as faithfully as any troops ever did. Mr. Walker objects to all statements of the witness based upon what others told him. I admit that I saw myself 1 or more drunken men, and ordered the arrest of one, to effect which one of my aides de camp, Colonel Dayton, had to shoot him with a pistol. The fire was most fearful beyond all question, but I saw with my own eyes no fire originated, and I always supposed that it originated in that burning pile of cotton which I saw with my own eyes. Mr. Walker: I object to this statement of the witness inasmuch as it is supposition. Witness: There is no supposition about it at all. I saw with my own eyes about 11 o'clock that morning, as I rode in the city of Columbia, cotton piled along the main street, which if prolonged would run up against the State House very near the old market house, and very near that drug store where my aide de camp reported the fire had originated. The wind was very strong, without a cloud in the sky, and it tossed and pitched the cotton about, lodging it in the trees and on the eaves of houses, all or most of which were of wood, so that many of us were prompted to remark, I know I did at least, that it presented the appearance of a snow storm prior to the great conflagration. Immediately on reaching the central part of the city myself and staff, General Howard, the immediate commander of the troops, following us, riding at my side, started to examine the city. Q. By Mr. Walker: When was this? A. In the morning, on entering the city, we rode down to the railroad depot, which I have described as the Charleston depot, and found the depot burned and many piles of corn meal and corn burning. We gave some direction to some of the soldiers who were there to pile aside the good so as to save as much as possible, because we needed it. I continued my ride along the railway in the direction of some foundries, I suppose about 500 or 600 yards down the stream from the depot along the track, when some picket rode up to me and told me not to go too far, that the rebels were on the hill in sight and I might get a shot. Turning back in the direction of the new State House, I noticed a soldier coming down the street drunk. I called General Howard's attention to the fact, saying, General, you had better look out or you will have hell to pay. You had better go and see about it in person. Q. By Mr. Walker: This was in the morning, too? A. Yes, sir, and before the fire broke out. He, General Howard, afterward reported to me that he had relieved the brigade of Stone, Stone's brigade being the first to enter Columbia and constituting the provost guard, and had selected another brigade of the same division to act as provost guard under immediate direction of General Charles R. Woods, an officer of the regular army and an officer of as high character as any in this or any other country. He is still living. To him was entrusted the safety and general good order of the city of Columbia during our occupation. He is now, I think, in Newark, Ohio. He is still an officer in the regular army, Lieutenant Colonel, 5th Infantry. I should suppose he could give as much personal testimony as any man living. General John A. Logan commanded the corps to which General Charles R. Woods' division belonged. He was also quartered near Columbia in the Preston House, which was not burned. The house in which I was quartered was not burnt either. It was a little remote, separated by vacant lots from the body of the town. Mr. Walker desired to have it noted that his objection to the admission of testimony taken in Egypt was taken because neither he nor Mr. Wells had ever seen it, and therefore could not proceed to cross-examine the witness in regard to it. He wished it stated further that he was not prepared to say that he would not object to it if he had seen it. Witness here testifies to occurrences in Georgia. Counsel for the United States here tenders to Mr. Walker a copy of the deposition of General Sherman taken in Egypt in the case of Joseph J. Brown, number 37. Mr. Walker states that he cannot withdraw his objections to the admission of this testimony, having had no time to look at it, and not being able to do so while the examination is going on. They must, therefore, as far as they are concerned, regard it as an ex parte statement, which they must object to being received in evidence. Counsel for the United States desires the Commissioner to note that counsel for the claimants retains the deposition. Mr. Walker replies that he retains what purports to be a copy of the deposition. Cross-examination by Mr. Walker. In regard to the capture of certain horses in Columbia, were there orders for the capture of all horses? A. Yes, sir. Q. Horses, therefore, taken from different stables in Columbia were taken by your orders? A. Yes, sir. Testimony as to occurrences before reaching Columbia. Q. Your idea upon leaving Savannah was to strike what point in North Carolina? A. My point was Orangeburg, in the first place to cut Charleston off from Augusta by destroying a section of that road, and thence to swing around to Orangeburg and threaten the road from Charleston to the north by Florence. But before I had accomplished this last movement, the rebel army in Charleston, commanded by William J. Hardee, had burned the place and evacuated it, and had escaped to the north. Therefore it was unnecessary for me to take my army over on the Florence road. Q. You thought, however, at one time of taking Charleston in the rear? A. Never. I put out that idea for the purpose of misleading. I never proposed to take Charleston in the rear. I am very familiar with the ground there. Q. And you never did, at any time, contemplate any such a thing? A. I never at any time contemplated a direct attack upon Charleston. Q. You thought at one time, however, of throwing a wing of your army into Charleston? A. From the sea. Q. You at no time thought of taking part of the army, in which your immediate command was, into the city of Charleston? A. No, sir, I was aiming at the higher game, namely, Richmond. Counsel. I am aware of that fact, General. Witness. Upon leaving Savannah, I ordered a division to be held in readiness at Port Royal, and to watch the effect upon Charleston when my army was to its rear, and if evacuated, to take possession immediately. But if the army remained in Charleston, to disembark at Bull's Bay and close the road which leads from Mount Pleasant up towards Georgetown, which I knew would result in Hardee's getting out of that place very quickly. Q. But you never had at any time in the course of your march any notion nor any remote idea of throwing any part of your army into the city of Charleston? A. I had not. In my official reports, which state my purposes, I there say that I regarded Charleston as a dead cock in the pit already. Q. Your idea, then, was to march your army through Columbia? A. Yes, sir. Q. Or by Columbia? A. Right through Columbia. Q. Were you at any time before crossing the Savannah River, or before reaching Columbia, aware of a strong spirit of vengeance, a desire for vengeance, animating your troops to be wreaked upon South Carolina? A. I was. The feeling was universal and pervaded all ranks. Q. Officers and all? A. Officers and all. We looked upon South Carolina as the cause of our woes. Q. And thought that she thoroughly deserved severe treatment? Answer. Yes, sir, that she thoroughly deserved extirpation. Q. You had every reason to believe that the army would carry out their determination in this respect? A. Except when restrained by order and discipline. Q. General, it is alleged that Von Moltke has said that your army was an armed mob. A. Von Moltke was never fool enough to say that. I have seen Von Moltke in person. I did not ask him the question because I did not presume that he was such an ass as to say that. Q. You deny that statement, do you? A. Our army was as good an army as the Prussians ever had, and Von Moltke is a man of too good sense to have made any such statement as has been attributed to him. Q. We have the strongest proof, General, of the fact that it was a wonderfully well-disciplined army. A. Von Moltke is a man of wonderful sense and sagacity, and I don't believe he ever said anything that could be tortured into that. He may have said that our armies in America, organized as they were, composed as they were, and moving over a country so different from Europe, form no guide or rule in European warfare, but that the Prussian army did learn many a lesson and profited by them from our war is manifest, and they and their officers are prompt to acknowledge it. Q. General, I have often heard your enemies in the South admit the perfect discipline of your troops. A. We could not have done what we did do unless we had kept them under good discipline. Q. Can you tell me anything about the 15th Corps? A. Yes, indeed I can. I know all about it. They were as fine a body of men as ever trod shoe leather. Q. They had the reputation of doing their work well? A. Yes, sir, thoroughly. Q. Whether it was to ravish a country or take a city? A. Strange to say, in the whole of our march I never heard of but 2 cases of ravishment, if you mean rape. Counsel. Mr. Walker, I do not mean rape. A. For going into a fight and going through a fight, they were the men they were described to be. Q. Hadn't they a reputation in Mississippi? A. They had a very high reputation in Mississippi. Q. Had they not a reputation there for leaving their mark upon the country? A. Yes, sir, they left their marks wherever they went. Q. You were aware of this? A. Perfectly. Q. When you reached Savannah? A. Indeed I was. I knew every officer and every private in that corps. Q. They were a wild set, were they not? A. No, sir. They were composed of first-rate men, farmers and mechanics, and men who are to-day as good citizens as we have in our country, but who went to war in earnest. They were mostly Western men from Ohio and Illinois. Q. They were good men for destroying property? A. Yes, sir. When told to do so, they destroyed it very quickly. Q. When not told to do so, if they thought they might do it, and it not be objectionable to their officers? A. They could do their work very thoroughly when they undertook it. Q. Were they in the habit of destroying property? A. No, sir, I don't think they were, more than was necessary. They were a very kind set of men, and I have known them frequently to share their rations with citizens, people along the country. I have often seen it done with my own eyes. Q. Do you mean to say that you were not aware when you were in the city of Beaufort, or say Orangeburg, before you reached Columbia, that the 15th Corps were a corps distinguished for the marks they left upon the country through which they passed? A. I may have known it, and very likely I did. I knew generally what was going on. Q. I asked you, did you know it? I should like you to answer that question. When you reached the village of Orangeburg before you arrived at Columbia, were you not aware that the 15th Corps were remarkable for the manner in which they left their mark upon the country through which they passed? Witness. Explain what you mean by mark. Counsel. Devastation. A. They killed every rebel within range of their guns and left their dead bodies to mark the ground. Q. Devastation of property, I mean. A. As to devastation of property, no more than the rest of the troops. I think we supplied the hospital in Orangeburg, which was occupied by rebel soldiers, wounded, and orphans and children who had been brought up from Charleston. Q. Did you burn any property in Orangeburg? A. Not a bit. They burned the property before we crossed the river. I was right opposite the river when we carried that bridge. I had been down to see Mower. Passing down below the town, I passed along with Mower's column and arrived just in time to see Giles Smith's brigade go over. I was one of the first to get over into town, and the town was burning then. I was told by a citizen there that it was burned by some Jew. Q. I ask you if you ordered any property to be burned in Orangeburg? A. I do not believe I did, unless it was some cotton, and I don't remember that. But the town was on fire before I crossed and got into it. Q. You do not remember ordering the cotton of one J. W. Carmalt to be burned? A. No, sir. Q. You do not remember an interview with Carmalt and his asking you to preserve the cotton because it was British property? A. I do not. Q. You do not remember telling him that you could afford no more protection to British cotton than than that of our own deluded citizens. That was my usual answer. Q. Your usual answer was that you could afford no protection to cotton belonging to British subjects? A. To any subjects more than to our own deluded people. Q. Whatever cotton you might find, no matter whose it was, you believed it to be your duty to burn it? A. The rebels left very little cotton for us to burn. Wheeler, who commanded the rebel cavalry, retreating before me, wrote to General Howard a note offering to abstain from the further burning of cotton if I would prevent the burning of houses. I wrote to him that I wanted him to burn all the cotton he could, because it would save us the trouble of doing it. We did not intend to hold the cotton, and therefore could leave nothing of value behind us which could be converted into money to be used in aid of the rebellion. Mr. Walker objected to anything that Mr. Wheeler told General Sherman. Witness. Wheeler did not tell me. He wrote a letter to General Howard, who handed it to me. Mr. Walker. Then let us see the letter. Q. I want this to be clearly understood, therefore I repeat the question, did you not tell all subjects of whatever nation they belonged to that you could not protect their cotton, and moreover it was your duty to burn it? A. I cannot recall having used that language. Q. Well, language to that effect? A. Nor do I recall the fact of any man having applied to me to protect his property by reason of being a foreign subject, but if any such did apply to me, I certainly would have told him pretty much as you have said. I would not undertake to protect his cotton, nor anybody else's cotton. I did not intend to stay there and protect it. I was going on. Q. If a colonel of one of your regiments, while foraging, met with a storehouse containing cotton, would it, or would it not, have been his duty to burn it? A. Yes, sir. Q. Without receiving specific orders to do so? A. Yes, sir. Q. How far above Columbia did you cross the Broad and Saluda rivers? A. I should suppose about 3 miles. Q. You sent on an advanced detachment, did you not? A. Whilst laying a pontoon bridge across Broad River, we passed over the brigade known as Stone's Iowa Brigade to cover the men whilst engaged in laying down the pontoon bridge. Q. These men under Colonel Stone first preceded the column? A. They remained on the opposite bank, deployed, of course, so as to prevent any of Wade Hampton's cavalry coming within rifle shot of the place where the pontoon bridge was being laid. Just about 9 o'clock in the morning I was down waiting for the bridge to be finished, when I received a note in pencil from Colonel Stone, saying that the mayor had come out and surrendered the city, and asking orders. I told him to go right in. This was about 9 or 10 in the morning. Q. Colonel Stone proceeded to the town? A. Yes, sir. They were the first troops that entered the city of Columbia. Q. Did you offer any terms or promise any protection to the city of Columbia or its inhabitants? A. Never. Q. You did not promise that private property should be protected? A. Never. Q. Did Colonel Stone? A. No, sir. He had no authority. Q. And you didn't promise at any time that the citizens would be safe in the enjoyment of their private property? A. I made no promise. It is very probable I may have said that there was no necessity for being frightened, that we were not going to burn anything except arsenals, machine shops, and foundries, but it was not in the form of a promise. If it was said, it was a mere conversational remark, probably to the mayor or some of the people who came to me very much alarmed, as they naturally would be at the fall of their city. Q. You, however, entered the city of Columbia with the main army about 2 hours later? Yes, sir. Q. I would like for you to be particular. Please try and remember how long it was afterwards. A. Stone's brigade could not have been in town more than an hour or an hour and a half before I came in. We came in very quickly. The pontoon bridge was nearly done when I got this message from Stone, and sent back and told him to go right into town. Q. Most of the testimony filed in this case states it to be about 2 hours later. Upon deliberation, would you not think that about the time? A. It was a very short time. I think we were in there before noon, and the day was pretty well advanced before we got the bridge done, and Stone was to uncover the bridge just before its completion. Q. Wouldn't this be about correct, if you were to say that the main army entered Columbia about 12 o'clock? A. Near 11. I suppose nearer 11 than 12 o'clock, somewhere between 11 and 12. Q. You were riding at the head of the column? A. Yes, sir. Q. With General Howard? A. General Howard was by my side. He was commanding the right wing, and I was commanding in chief. General Howard had his written orders made 2 days before as to what he was to do after we reached Columbia. Our staffs rode right behind us, and then came the head of the column, which I think was the 2nd Division, 15th Corps, commanded by General Charles R. Woods. Q. General Howard, then, I understand you to say, had orders from you as to the disposition of troops? A. Yes, sir. The left wing didn't come within 12 miles. That wing passed Broad River at Alston, from 12 to 15 miles above Columbia. The right wing was composed of the 15th and 17th Corps. The 15th Corps was to pass through Columbia, right on the outskirts of it. The 17th Corps was not to go into Columbia at all, but to stretch itself across the Winnsboro road, ready to move on to Winnsboro. The leading division of the 15th Corps, commanded by General Woods, was to occupy Columbia, and the other 2 divisions to pass through and encamp just outside the town. Q. These were your orders? A. Yes, sir. That division was to furnish the usual provost guard for the city. Q. The 17th Corps, I understand you to say, were not to come into Columbia. They were to stretch across to the Winnsboro road, and the 15th Corps was to enter Columbia. A. Yes, sir. Q. When you entered Columbia, did you meet any of Stone's brigade there? A. I found Stone's brigade with their arms stacked, engaged in trying to put out that burning cotton which was piled in the main street, not far from the market house, the pile of cotton being at least 300 or 400 feet long, and from 2 to 3 bales high. They were endeavoring to extinguish the flames so far as to enable the train of the 15th Corps, which would have to come right behind, to follow that road and to pass through. They were trying to make sufficient space around so as to let them pass safely, especially the ammunition train, which it is a little dangerous to have pass near great fires. They were endeavoring to extinguish that fire. I found them in the act of so doing when I entered Columbia. Q. A great many of Stone's troops were disbanded, were they not, and scattered about? A. Pickets would be over the town, posted at intersections of such streets and in such places as Colonel Stone thought proper for the maintenance of general good order in the town. Q. Were not a larger number of them at the time of your entry or shortly afterwards not under orders? A. They were scattered through the town, you know, like soldiers, generally, when they have stacked arms. It is the custom to let a few men go off and get water or something of that kind, and they were probably out for such purposes. Q. Did you see any stores along Main street being broken into? A. No, sir, I did not. Main street was crowded full of negroes, escaped prisoners, and officers of our army who had been imprisoned there, but who had succeeded in making their escape. There must have been 300 there. I met the mayor, Dr. Goodwin, there, an old gentleman. I was still mounted, and he came up to my horse, and we had a conversation about one thing and another, and afterwards, on a second meeting, he told me which house he had selected for my occupation, namely the house of Blanton Duncan, on a street at right angles with this Main street, and removed from it, I should suppose, about 1,000 yards. Q. I understand you to say that you saw no pillaging going on along Richardson or Main street during the hours of daylight on the 17th. A. I did not. Q. Nor anywhere else in Columbia during the hours of daylight? A. No, sir. Q. You were not apprised of it in any way? A. I was not. Q. You were not aware that almost every store along Main street was broken into by men in Federal uniform? A. I was informed by the mayor that Wade Hampton's cavalry had gone through the town and plundered their stores before we got there. The mayor himself reported that to me. Q. I ask you if you are aware that these stores were plundered by men in Federal uniform subsequently? A. I do not know anything about the Federal uniform being used by the rebels. Q. I did not ask about the rebels. I asked a very simple question, and I want an answer. A. I heard nothing of the plundering of stores by our men during the day of our first occupation of the city of Columbia. Q. And know nothing of it? A. I know nothing of it personally or officially. Q. Do you know anything of it in any way whatsoever, individually, privately, or in any way? A. No, sir. On the contrary, there was very good order in the city. I walked about the streets like everybody else that day, and saw nothing out of the way. A good many people came to see me and claimed protection, and I told them to go back home and behave themselves. I came across some of my old friends in Columbia and paid them visits. Q. I then understand you to say there was no plundering going on along on Main street when your main army passed through? A. If there was, I saw it not. Q. You have stated to me that there was a general feeling through the army, pervading all ranks, of a desire to wreak vengeance, to extirpate, if I may be permitted to use your own words, South Carolina? A. There was. End of Part 4. Of Who Burnt Columbia by Augustine T. Smith. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Part 5. Deposition of General William Tecumseh Sherman. Part 2. Q. Was that feeling shared in by your superior officers? A. Not at all, unless it may be inferred from a paragraph in a letter of General Halleck to me, which was published in the official documents, in which he said, in case I took Charleston, he hoped I would sow salt upon it, so that it would never resurrect. That is the only paragraph I can recall in any letter of instruction or communication to me during the time I was in Savannah or before. Q. What was your reply? Answer. My reply was, that if we took Charleston, I supposed there would be very little left of it when we got through with it, but I did not intimate that I was going to Charleston because I had made up my mind what course to pursue before that time. Still, my letter is a public letter and is of record. It has been printed, I suppose. I can find it if you desire it. Counsel. I am not particularly anxious to see the letter, if you can give me the substance of your reply. Witness. I refer to the testimony given by me before the Committee on the Conduct of the War, in which I extract many of my own letters. I think I used the language in a letter to General Halleck. Witness looking over a printed volume. I am now trying to see if I can find it. My language is, I will bear in mind your hint as to Charleston, and don't think salt will be necessary. When I move, the 15th Corps will be on the right of the right wing, and their position will bring them naturally into Charleston first, and if you have watched the history of that corps, you will have remarked that they generally do their work up pretty well. The truth is, the whole army is burning with an insatiable desire to wreak vengeance upon South Carolina. I almost tremble at her fate, but feel that she deserves all that seems in store for her. Many and many a person in Georgia asked me why we did not go to South Carolina, and when I answered that I was en route for that State, the invariable reply was, well, if you will make those people feel the severities of war, we will pardon you for your desolation of Georgia. I look upon Columbia as quite as bad as Charleston, and I doubt if we shall spare the public buildings there as we did at Milledgeville. At Milledgeville we did not destroy anything except the arsenal. Let me in this connection refer to General Halleck's letter. Q. What is that you are reading from? A. This is a volume of extracts from the report of the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, which I have had bound for my own immediate use. Witness read from letter of General Halleck the following extract. Orders have been issued for all officers and detachments having 3 months or more to serve to join your army via Savannah. Those having less than 3 months to serve will be retained by General Thomas. Should you capture Charleston, I hope that by some accident the place may be destroyed, and if a little salt should be thrown upon its site, it may prevent the growth of future crops of nullification and secession. General Halleck's letter was not in the form of an order. It was among the letters, it was among the friendly letters which constantly passed between us. Q. It was an official dispatch, was it not? A. He signed it with his official title. Q. Printed, is it not? A. Printed by me. Q. Printed among the official dispatches by the committee appointed by Congress upon the conduct of the war? A. Yes, sir. Q. You were one of that committee, were you not, General? A. Nary time. They were after me. They did not have anything but congressmen on their committee, of course. Q. Had nobody but congressmen? A. Of course not. It was a congressional committee. It was a joint committee upon the conduct of the war. I was a mere witness before them, and this is my testimony, holding up a printed report. Q. These dispatches were furnished by you? A. Yes, sir, by me, and a copy of them kept in the War Department here. Q. How long had this cotton been burning before you reached Columbia? A. I cannot tell, of course. Q. You say a day and a half? A. No, I do not. I say it was burning when we got there. Q. Before you reached the city of Columbia, I do not mean arrived opposite, did you not say that the fire was burning a day and a half before you entered the city? A. No, sir, I say the bridge had been burned, and the depot buildings, a day or a day and a half before we crossed. Q. Had been burned? A. Yes, sir, had been burned down and were smoldering. We could see it across the river, not further than from here, the office of the British and American Mixed Commission near the Treasury Department, to the President's house. Q. Do I understand you to say that burning cotton flies in the air? A. Indeed it does. Q. About how many feet high in the air? A. As many as 600 feet. Yes, I saw it fly, probably from 400 or 500 yards, 1,500 feet in distance. Q. I do not mean rolling along the ground. A. No, sir, I mean up in the air, like a fireball. Q. How about height? Does it rise above 10 feet? A. Yes, sir, 150 feet, whirling round. Q. Balls of what size? A. Probably 50 pounds, 40 or 50 pounds. Q. How many feet in the air? A. 100 or 150 feet in the air. Q. I do not mean when they are flying in the air. A. I mean when they are picked up by the force of the wind and drawn down again through the narrow streets, as you have seen straws and cotton carried along and then blown away off. Q. Was this a narrow street the cotton was blowing in? A. No, sir. Q. It was in an open street, was it not? A. No, sir, it was in the main street. I suppose the main street must have been 80 feet wide. Q. Were there trees on each side? A. Yes, sir, but they were stripped of their leaves. They were dry. It was in the winter time, and the cotton was lodged all through the trees, hanging in clusters like snowflakes. There were some green trees, some of what we call the willow oak, that were green, but the most of the trees were dry, deciduous trees, with the leaves stripped off, were of a dry kind. Q. Columbia is a beautiful city, is it not? A. Yes, sir, a very beautiful city. Q. There were fine avenues on each side of this cotton? A. No, sir, hardly room to pass on each side. When we got in, they were hauling the cotton back so as to let the wagons pass when we entered that part of the street. Q. There were fine avenues of trees? A. Yes, sir, there were a good many trees. Q. You say the cotton could lodge in the trees when it was flying away? A. It did lodge a great deal in the trees. Q. This was on Main Street? A. Yes, sir, on the street which, prolonged, hits the new State House. Q. Richardson or Main? A. I think it was the Main Street. Q. That is the one leading to the Capitol? A. Yes, sir, from the direction from which we were coming. I called it the Main Street. Counsel. That is the Main Street. There is no question about that. Witness. We came right down on what is called Richardson Street on this map, referring to map heretofore introduced in evidence by the claimant. It is the Main Street. We came right down where the stores are. Q. Leading from the Capitol up the river? A. Yes, sir. I should suppose that burning cotton must have been 3 or 4 blocks short of the Capitol, that is, before we got to the Capitol, and the drug store was on the right-hand corner toward the fire. Q. Can you state positively that you saw any house take fire from pieces of burning cotton? A. I did myself. I saw in the night time, between 2 and 4 in the night, as I came down in the neighborhood of the fire and walked over to where Mr. and Mrs. Simmons were living, and they came out on the porch. We stood there looking at the fire roaring, tearing down, and I saw Dayton and others, and probably McCoy of my staff was with me, and we were just watching. I was in supreme command, but I did not exercise direct command because there were plenty of commanding officers on the spot, and I thought that too many commanding officers would spoil any game. But I saw myself great masses of fire consisting of both cotton and shingles thrown over our heads, and one mass of cotton and shingles set fire to a wood shed, and there being soldiers close by, I had the fire put out. It must have been at least 3 o'clock. Q. How many blocks from the place where the cotton was? A. There were 2 intervening blocks in view when I saw this with my own eyes. Q. How far from the cotton you saw burning at 11 o'clock in the morning? A. Probably 6 blocks. Q. In what direction? A. About northeast. Q. What time of the night was it that you saw the light of the fire in your room? A. The first light, just after dark. It must have been about 7 o'clock in the evening. Q. It broke out near the market, did it not? A. Yes, sir. Q. Where is the market? After referring to a map made an exhibit by Claimants in case of Wood and Hayworth. On Assembly Street, between Washington and Plain. I think the cotton was burned in Main Street, near the corner of Plain, or Washington, it may be. Q. You saw this fire at 7 o'clock in the evening? A. Yes, sir. Q. You saw the fire at 11 o'clock in the morning? A. I had seen cotton burning in the street, in the main street, and on 2 or 3 side streets as I rode into town. Q. How was it this fire surprised you more than the others? A. From the brilliant flames. Cotton in burning makes no flame, but I saw from the reflection on my wall that there was a house burning. Q. Is not a fire from cotton easily kept under? A. It is very easily kept under if you have plenty of force to do it, and there is not too much wind prevailing at the time. Q. Are you not aware that fire was set to houses in Columbia by individuals? A. I assure you I am not. I did not believe it then, and I do not believe it now. I have asked the escaped prisoners, one of whom is now staying at my house, and who was there a prisoner, and he tells me he saw with his own eyes carts hauling cotton down in the streets for burning 3 days before we got in. I will give you his name. His name is Captain S. H. M. Byers. He is now at my house on his way to Zurich, Switzerland. He will leave on Saturday. Objected to by Mr. Walker as not responsive to the question, and as being hearsay. Witness. You are pushing me a little beyond the extent of my personal knowledge, and supposing you were sincere in your desire for information, I referred you to a party who was present at the time and in a position to know the facts. Q. You feel a great interest in the question of the burning of Columbia, do you not? A. I do. Q. Far beyond the value of money? A. The value of money is nothing compared with the elucidation of the historic truth. Q. You felt as soon as you saw the first signs of a general conflagration in Columbia that the authorship of it would be visited upon you? A. Certainly. I knew I would be held responsible for it by everybody. Q. And as a matter of deep personal interest to yourself, you are glad to testify to-day? A. Perfectly so. It is my pleasure to testify at any time on that subject or any other, especially on this. Q. You have, therefore, a warm personal interest in this question? A. I have. Q. And in vindicating yourself and the United States forces from the charges which have been, and which you knew would be, brought against you? A. If I had made up my mind to burn Columbia, I would have burnt it with no more feeling than I would a common prairie dog village, but I did not do it, and I therefore want that truth to be manifest. That is the interest I have in it. It is not a question of houses, of property, or anything of the kind. Q. And you feel an interest in vindicating your army from the charge? A. Yes, sir. Q. You told me some time ago that you know in no way of houses being set fire to by individuals in Columbia during the night of the 17th of February, 1865. A. I saw no soldier engaged in any act of conflagration except this young man who appeared to be drunk and running about suspecting that he was engaged in some mischief. Q. You did see one? A. He was behaving badly. He was the man whom my aide-de-camp shot and brought to. I saw no soldier engaged in any act of incendiarism that night. Q. Do you know of any individual firing private property on